No, you're fine, Chief. We will now be coming out of closed session, reconvene. It is 7:10. Report of actions taken to closed session.
If the council discussed the item listed as Fry versus the City of Norco, discussed the potential acquisition of real property, which was added to the agenda by a 5-0 vote, but there was no anticipated litigation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Pledge of Allegiance, Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening.
Hi. I'd like to pray to open this session, if you don't mind. Bowing your heads, close your eyes, if you want to. Dear God, I just want to thank you for this city council. Lord, I thank you for the staff and the volunteers that make Norco a great place to live and to work. Lord, I ask that you would help them with every decision that they've got to make, Lord, things that they want to do, Father, that are waiting to come to pass. I pray that you would make that way possible and that you would bring the right counsel to them. So we thank you, God, for this day, and we just ask for a great meeting. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
By the way, that's Aaron Diaz from the New Beginnings Community Church. We will now have a Community Spirit Award presented. Robin Grunmeyer will be doing it.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to present the Community Spirit Award. And if I could, Mr. Mark Moore, would you come join me at the podium, please? You can come stand right here. I'm sure most of you that are here this evening know Mark. For those of you that don't, I think when I think of Mark, I think parking guy extraordinaire. And let me tell you, parking at the fair, parking at Horse Week, parking when we have impromptu military events. And I don't think I've ever heard Mark say no. Probably never. I have watched him out in the dust, in the dirt, in the heat, the wind, every kind of weather inclement that Norco could bring your way. I've watched Mark out there just working his heart out with nobody watching, a lot of times with very little help. I know he's got his crew here of loyal supporters and fans, but there's been times where I've watched Mark out there by himself, getting these things done so that when we have a community event, there's limited chaos in parking. Any of us that have ever worked parking at a community event know limited chaos is a good day. And Mark makes that happen. And when I was asked to do the Community Service Award, I was thinking about the heart of a servant and somebody that gives back, and it's somebody that's doing those things when nobody's watching, when nobody's taking a picture, when nobody's doing a social media post. And I couldn't think of somebody more deserving than this guy right here. So, and I will tell you, I was able to help with parking at a recent kind of impromptu event. Mark, I have so much more appreciation for you than before. I was incognito. I was not Councilwoman Grunmeyer that night. I had a ball cap and a T-shirt on, and it is interesting to work parking. So thank you so much for what you do. Do you want to say a few words?
Just thank you for this award, and it would not happen without my friends, my helpers. There's so many people that support me in everything that I do in this city, and I love this city, and that's why I do it.
Awesome.
So
Thank you, Mark. Let's get a picture real quick.
Ye- You know, Mark is going to have to share that with his dogs, because no place he goes without having his puppies with him.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very, very, very well deserved. Great choice, Councilwoman Grunmeyer. Moving on to City Council reports on regional boards. Mayor Pro Tem Newton.
Should be no report. We have a CDA board meeting tomorrow. Thank you.
Yes, nothing to report as well. I have a RCRA meeting coming up as well this month.
Nothing to report.
I have a few. Most of that stuff, I guess the major one, November 19th, and for those of you that were invited but didn't go, you missed a good lasagna meal. But I want to tell you, on November 19th at the Western Municipal Water District meeting, they featured Adele, and I'm going to mess up his last name, Haga Cahill. He's the general manager for Metropolitan. And what he talked about, and this is going for you, Chad, right off the top, is the 3 words: irrigation, innovation, and inclusion. And his words were so true about water. They're not making it anymore. You better save what you got. And the whole thing is reclaim, recharge, do what you got to do with it. So in the future, and this is their Metropolitan, if you don't know, they look 10, 20, 50 years down the road at how to make sure we have water in the future. That's why Dominagoni Lake is down there and out towards Hemet. His point, and this is what this is right after he talked to our state senator, our U.S. Senator Feinstein. She did a tour with him, and he goes, we need to start saving our water. We need to replenish. Start using our reclaimed water. And that's the direction, and this is from them. So we as a city need to take that in heart. We need to start this reclamation and using and recharging, and I would challenge Greg over there with the CDA, recharge our water table. The other thing, Western is they're having a redistricting, their first public hearing for them. That's going to be at 14205 Meridian Parkway in Riverside. That's right off the 215 as you go out towards Paris. It's going to be on Wednesday, December 15th at 6 p.m. So, November 26th. You know, Brian, Melvin and I'm going to miss her. Cecilia. Yeah, I couldn't think of that. We had a heck of a time out there. Berwin Hanna calls me up and says, hey, we got to go out to Temecula. Well, tell me what, we drove all the way down to Temecula with a NART rig going out there. And en route, found out, and this is good, we were out there with Riverside County Animal Control, everything. We were going to go out there and lift this horse up and rescue it from our little NART unit. Get out there and go, well, you haven't trained with Riverside County Sheriff's Aviation Unit yet. So we weren't certified by them to lift the horse. But you know what? We recovered the horse. We were on the recovery end when the horse was landed. And I have a greater appreciation for your people and the professionalism. I have a greater better opinion of our Riverside County animal health thing and all the work in the team. Yes, there was no egos there. It was just the pilot says, you haven't certified with me before. I don't know what you can do. We're going to fix that. And Melvin, and we're going to fix it. We're going to get ourselves trained. We're going to go work with our aviation bureau. So the only thing is recently we've had 2 air rescues under NART in the past, but the new aviation bureau commander goes, I have to see you be able to hook to the rig. That's fine. That's easy. So it wasn't anything. I understand that. If I was flying that bird, I'd feel the same way. But I appreciate all the work that your staff and everybody else did there. We learned a lot that day, I tell you. If anything else, I learned that big rig doesn't turn very easy on some of those small roads. We were up in Tucalata Springs, up in there. If you've ever been back there, those are not 2-lane roads. They're a single lane, and there's no turnarounds. And then and later on, I'll talk about what I go to the animal welfare and arena safety seminars that are held up there over at the PRCA convention. I just got back this morning. And I later on tonight, I'll talk about it in my closing statements. But I just wanted to bring it out. And then, just so you know, yeah, there's the horse. Yay. And let me tell you, those rocks, that canyon, we looked at the path that horse got there, and it's lucky it didn't break its leg or its neck getting into that canyon. That canyon wall that he ran into was a good 30 feet up straight. That area where he's standing, right below that, was a good 15 feet through jagged rocks. How he got up into that, even the owner, when she fell, had no idea. And it was just, we were trying to find out how to move a rock. Unless I had a big earth-moving machine, I wasn't going to move any of those rocks. But that was the only way to get them out was by the airlift. But and those Hart guys, by the way, they're all full-time firemen, so they're pretty cool to work with. And that's about it. That's enough. Thank you.
So one of the things that came up previously is that Catherine Alleman and I, we visited to discuss a new hotel with a developer. I'll make sure that Andy gets the plans. We haven't even gotten the plans yet, but they've been submitted to Alma. It's pretty exciting. I actually think I mentioned it also at the last meeting. I attended an amazing meeting between Silver Lakes, Norco College, and Better Nutritionals to create a avenue for them to get employees as a member of the Norco College President's Advisory Committee. What I'm doing right now is introducing the president of Norco College to multiple businesses throughout Norco and Corona in order to create a workforce from Norco College into those different businesses and hopefully local. One of the things that was discussed was really interesting, workforce housing between Eastvale, Norco, Corona. Trying to find ways to keep people as local as possible. We have our Pearl Harbor coming up. Is there something after that? Okay, and then Friday, I actually have a pretty interesting meeting with I've been asked to meet with the director of Cal Cities in Palm Springs, and I just got appointed to the Admin Finance Committee for the state, and part of the reason for that is I want to be able to be an advocate for this new sales tax measure whereby Amazon gets all of the city, wherever Amazon is, rather than this used to be we all shared it because we all take the trucks. They just changed the law so that if the Amazon fulfillment center is in your city, you get all of the sales tax essentially. So, for example, Eastvale, it's a $40 million windfall. And the problem is that we take their trucks. And so that will go back to the admin finance for Cal Cities. And so I asked to be moved from community services over to that one so I could have a voice for the city of Norco. I'm not exactly sure what the director wants to speak to me about, but I always get nervous because I'm pretty vocal about Norco. That said, that's all I have. Moving on to the consent calendar. Does anybody wish to pull something?
Motion to approve.
Do I hear a second? Who was first? Do we have any public comments?
We have no public speaker cards for consent.
Okay, so I just close public comments. Once again, can you restate your motion, Mr. Newton? Restate Mr. Newton, and Ted's the second. Now we'll vote.
Motion to approve.
Right.
Which one do I push?
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Moving on to public comments 4. This is the time when persons wishing to address the presiding governmental body regarding matters not in the agenda may be heard. Please submit a speaker card to the meeting clerk. That's Dana sitting right over there. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less. The Ralph M. Brown Act limits the governmental bodies, that's us, our ability to respond to comments on non-agendized matters at the time such comments are made. The governmental body, which is your city council, shall not discuss or act relative to any general public comment. So if you need to fill out a card for public comments, please feel free. Who's first?
First public speaker is Kathy Thistlewaite.
Hi, Kathy. How are you? Nice to see you.
Sleep deprived.
Oh,
Okay. Hi, I'm Kathy Thistlethwaite, reside at 4783 Bluff Street. And the comments this evening were regarding the activities of my neighbor on Saturday, November 27th. We had a live band 2 houses down that was blasting music 50 decibels inside my home, 65 decibels outside, until 3:45 in the morning. My frustration with the sheriff's department started at 2 a.m. with the first phone call. Apparently, the first phone call that came to them was at midnight. At 1:45, I went up and talked to my neighbor, spoke with his mother, who answered the door, asked her to please turn it down. I need to get up in the morning, and I'm not going to get to sleep at this point. No change in volume. At 2 a.m., I put in my first phone call to the sheriff. At 2:20, my husband called. Both times we called, we gave the address. By 3:30, 5 phone calls had been made. There was no response. 50 decibels inside my house. 3:45, finally, the music stops. At 3:55, a sheriff's car pulls up in front of the lot. And they were there about 20 minutes. I did not get a call back from the sheriff. I was very tempted to offer breakfast to my neighbor at 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and 10 a.m. just to prove a point, but I didn't. I did go over and speak with him that afternoon, Sunday afternoon, and he's an officer at Long Beach. He should know better. He was apologetic. Actions speak louder than words. For 8 hours, I got to listen to music 50 decibels loud in my home. And I didn't have a single bit of help from Riverside Sheriff's Department. I've talked to Greg, I've spoken with Brian, and I had a conversation with Lieutenant Rowan. A lot of mistakes were made on their behalf, one of which was they absolutely did not find the party. How do you not find a home that is lit up like a stadium at 2 a.m.? It's the only house on the block with lights on, with music that loud. When you have multiple calls coming in and nobody stopped it. At 3:45, the band shut down with no assistance from the sheriff's department. We have a noise ordinance. It wasn't enforced. Spoke with an officer today. He tells me that a warning was given at 3:55. By then, the music, of course, had been turned off, and a warning. So no fine, no ordinance followed. I'm frustrated beyond repair. I did everything I was supposed to do as a civilian that was civil. Can't say the same for my neighbor. Something needs to change. And like I said, I had a conversation with Lieutenant Rowan. It sounds like I'm going to be meeting with Officer Padilla next Tuesday. But the utter disappointment that I feel is beyond repair at this point. Not impressed with what the sheriff didn't do for us.
thank you, Kathy.
Next, excuse me, is Bonnie Slager.
Hi, Bonnie.
Well, on the flip side, I'm very happy the sheriff stopped a speeder in front of my house this afternoon. That made me really happy. But 2 other issues. Another fire in the riverbed, the same homeless camp that burned 4th of July weekend. Those neighbors that live on Woodward and close by there are really tired of having to keep their trucks hooked to their trailers to evacuate if things get worse. And, you know, that's fine to work with our unhoused neighbors, but what about our housed neighbors that are paying taxes, that are trying to make mortgage payments on their homes and be good citizens in town, that are continually threatened by fires from these homeless camps in the river? There's got to be a little more fairness on that, guys. My third issue is, again, waste management. And I know you've heard me complain before, but I pay waste management over $300 a month. $91.58 of that is for the pilot truck. This is what I get for that $91.58. I put my dumpster in front of my gate because I don't want to leave my gates open to the back of my property, so that's on me. The pilot truck comes twice a week, moves the dumpster approximately 12 feet out in the street, and that's the last I see of the pilot truck. Usually the manure truck, once they dump the manure, set the dumpster on my driveway on the concrete, and I can push it back. Part of my physical fitness program, I guess, is I push the dumpster back up the driveway behind the garage where I keep it. Well, Monday, the manure truck didn't put the dumpster on the concrete. They left it out on the dirt parkway. I cannot physically move the dumpster off the parkway in the dirt. At 4:30, the pilot truck blew by my house to my neighbor 3 doors down and took their dumpster in, but didn't take my dumpster in. Finally, Stu and I wrestled around and got it in. I don't know who you're supposed to call for waste management on these things. Every time I call, I go through a phone tree and they say, oh, dumpsters are commercial, and they put me someplace else and I go the phone tree again. By that time, I figured they weren't there. But you guys approved the contract with Waste Management. They are not meeting my needs for $91.58 a month. I don't get that kind of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
The next speaker is Keep'em Deloach.
Hey, Keep'em, how are you?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So this evening, last year you guys gave me the proclamation for Veterans, Military, and Families Month. So this month, I'm kindly asking you to consider making it an established, I don't know how to say the right words. I would like to make the proclamation permanent for every November from here on out. That every November is Veterans, Military, and Family Appreciation Month. Without our veterans and our military, we couldn't have the joys and the goodness that we have today, and I proudly support that. So I would kindly ask you to consider making it a permanent proclamation. I don't know if that's the right words. Making the proclamation permanent so that every year here on out, November is Veterans and Military and Family Appreciation Month, and I kindly ask you to consider that. I have no fancy speech. Please and thank you.
Hey, great, thank you. The way that would work is like at the end of a meeting, one of us would ask to agendize it for a future meeting, and then we would discuss it then. All right?
I would ask you to kindly consider that, please.
The last speaker is Kurt Knox.
Hey, Kurt.
Three things. They're housekeeping issues, kind of. Number one, I asked for a survey about the, I asked for the audio for the Planning Commission on September 8th, and I don't know if I checked my email, and I haven't received that yet. That was number one. Number two, is the in March, this issue was so important that you guys needed a consultant. It was the Commission on Diversity and Conclusion. I don't know where we are at with that. So that was number two. And number three, about a month, maybe 2 months ago, Norco took a survey, or the citizens took a survey, and I haven't seen the results of that survey publicly yet. So those three things. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt.
I have no further speaker cards for this item.
All right. Now close public comments. Moving on to number 5, discussion action items. Order of presentation for discussion items. 1, staff report presentation. 2, council questions of staff. 3, public comment. 4, council discussion and action. We will go to 5A, recruitment process for Measure R Citizens Oversight Committee members. City Clerk.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I bring before you tonight an item that was requested on February 17th by City Council to bring the recruitment process for Measure R back to City Council for review and possibly aligning the member recruitment process for Measure R, aligning it with the other committees, commissions, and advisory council. Currently, we have a lottery process that was put into place in January when the Measure R committee was established. We did make a change the beginning of this year to remove the third party process, and all applications would go into the lottery process, and then the lottery would choose, and the appointment would be made from the lottery process. So I bring before you today, if you would like to discuss and have the recruitment process align with the other committees and commissions, where they would go through the annual application process. You would vet the applications and make your appointments and vote at a council meeting in June, like we do with each and other committees. So I just bring this back to you tonight. If you have any questions or concerns, or you would like to discuss this and provide direction on which way you would like to go. I did include a resolution to, if we do pass to have the lottery process removed, we would need to amend the bylaws, and the resolution is already ready to do that tonight if you choose to do so. Do you have any questions?
Council? Anyone?
Yes, I'll ask a question. So Dana,
Sure.
And I know I asked you these questions already, but just for the benefit of the public, the formation of the Measure R committee was advertised as included in the process for through the community outreach, that there would be strong citizen oversight.
Correct. It was on the ballot measure, and an ordinance was passed to include a Measure R Citizens Oversight Committee. Correct.
Okay. And was there any language in any of those that talked about it being an independent committee?
I can give you, let's see if I have that here in front of me. If I brought it does say just establishing the Measure R Citizens Oversight Committee for audit purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Dana, do you have any cards on this?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so
I would like to hear the cards first, if you can,
okay,
Mayor.
all
Thank
right.
you.
We'll
Going
now
back to be
open
the
public
clerk.
comments. Oh, she was fast.
Okay, the first speaker is Kurt Knox.
Hello again.
Hello. I hopefully am talking to just 4 of you, not the one that pushed this through. Just 4 of you. I oppose this. Just 3 years ago, there was a promise to the citizens. 18 years old, Norco citizen, and a desire. That's all that was needed to be on this committee. And there was a chance, not a guarantee, a chance that you could serve Norco. That's what was promised. This committee, you promised to follow their direction. And then this happens. And I sat there and I thought, why? Why the change? And I really did think, I'm like, why? It was because of optics. Optics. This oversight committee, even though it didn't have teeth, the optics of going against this oversight committee would look so bad to somebody that wanted to put their supporters on there, that they needed to change this. They needed to change this in order to rig this committee. I don't know what to say to this one person, maybe two people that push this through. They're probably going to use words like, hey, they missed meetings. We need to streamline this process. Hey, these people really don't understand Norco like we do. Their dedication is not like it should be. They don't know Norco's history. Or they may use language, we know better. That's what it is just codes. It's codes to let me put in my own people. Please, you four stand strong. I'm hoping I'm talking to four of you. Now the one, I don't know who it is. The one, I can't believe you passed this through. I really can't. Norco people are too smart for this. I believe that. And I believe the four people will stand strong, hold to their word, saying, hey, we promised Norco citizens this is going to be a lottery. It doesn't matter if you look like us. It doesn't matter if you think like us. You're a Norco citizen. We trust you. If missing meetings were sorry, I'm going off. If missing meetings were a thing, do other commissions have this too? Yes. Is it in their bylaws?
Yes.
Is it in this bylaw? It's an easy fix. If you miss 3 meetings, you're out. That's an easy fix rather than changing it to this. That's what I have to say. Live up to your promise. Your name's worth it. Your name is worth it.
Next speaker is Mike Thompson.
Good evening, Council.
Hi, Mike.
If I remember correctly, when Measure R was going through the works, that a big sales pitch was the lottery system where any citizen that, put in would have a shot at getting picked for this commission now. And I would like to see that maintained when it comes to the appointments that when somebody's term runs out. Use a lot, advertise and go through the people that put in the requests and go through the lottery system. If there's an attendance problem, then I propose that go 6 months, attendance problem, 3 meetings, or a year, whatever you decide. Then go and advertise and take your request that way from people, and then go ahead and pick. If you're going to fill in for somebody that's been fired for poor participation, then that's fine. But when a term comes due, I would suggest to stick with the lottery system, so that if you have an overzealous citizen who wants to make good with all of you, they're not showing favoritism and the appearance of favoritism the other way, like it was sold in the beginning, doesn't appear. And that's what I would propose. Just only when their terms are up, keep the lottery. Otherwise, replace somebody through your choosing, which is fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
I have no further public comment on this.
Nobody else? Go ahead, Norva. Come on up. You fill out a card, though. Oh, you didn't give it to her?
No, because I just want to get up here and agree with both of the prior speakers. It was promised at the time that we fought so hard to get Measure R that it would go through the lottery process. So I would really I'd like to see it stay that way, even though I would like to see you guys pick out somebody based on their application and et cetera, and that maybe they're more talented, more apropos. But I think we need to stick with the lottery because that's what was promised, and that's how we convinced a lot of people to vote for it. Thank you.
Seeing nobody else, bring it back to council. Ted?
Thank you, Kevin, for hearing the cards first. You know, I understand why this was done and why we wanted to look at it. We're looking at things like attendance. And Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, we can change, or John, an ordinance or this ordinance to reflect if there's an attendance problem on one of the members, correct?
Yes, and it is in the bylaws already that attendance. Yeah. So.
Well, what's the number of meetings they miss? Have you?
It's 3 meetings in 1 year.
3 meetings in 1 year.
Correct.
And they meet every month.
Correct.
But I know a lot of the meetings have been canceled.
Yeah, with the Measure R, they're required to meet quarterly or as needed. And at the beginning, we were meeting monthly, and now we're back to quarterly.
Okay, so, and to miss quarterly, if you miss 3 meetings in a year, you've just about missed the whole year. And just, I'm helping the public out too, so that's why I understand it. So that's something that we really need to address.
Correct.
And that's in the bylaws and in the ordinance, correct?
Yeah, it is across all of our boards and commissions, advisory council, the same thing. It's in our municipal code for the 3 meetings per year for their, if they miss.
And it includes Measure R.
Correct.
Committee on that. It's listed specifically, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
In our the bylaws for the Measure R, it refers to the municipal code, and the municipal code is, as I had sent to you today, the 3 meetings.
Right. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is so that everybody understands.
No, exactly.
That Measure R was handled differently, the selection process initially.
Correct.
And I agree with Mr. Knox, Mr. Thompson, and Norva, is that we were doing this. And when this came about, and I'm surprised that we don't have more of the original Measure R committee people here to speak on this, but this was supposed to be an independent. I heard it all the way through, and during 2018, it's going to be a pet project, a pet committee for the council members. Mike's smiling back there because he heard it too. And that's exactly what, and that's why I'm asking you if we can use attendance and that to remove those people that aren't showing up. They want to be on it, but they don't want to put the effort to it. And that's so as long as that's included in there. Do I agree with doing a lottery? No. But I do agree with what we told people in 2018 when we fought for this to get it on the ballot. And it's not even been 4 years. It's been enacted in March of 2019 that we had it. And the monies they started doing that was in the latter part. I just think it's difficult to change it this quickly, but I'm going to list the rest of the council members. Thank you.
Robin?
Dana, can I get clarification on what the processes would be for somebody that has violated the attendance requirements? Kind of a step-by-step. Would they get a letter? How would the whole process work?
Actually, according to the municipal code, it would just be the secretary would report to the city council of the actions of the absences, and it would be up to the city council if they chose to remove the person from the council or from the committee or commission. It is, in my opinion, it feels a little vague on for the attendance on what you can and can't miss, what is an excused absence and not excused. Basically, it states that an excused absence is all it is in writing by the member that they will not be at the meeting. It doesn't say it has to be illness, it has to be anything specific. It's just as long as it's in writing to the secretary prior to the meeting, it can be excused. So you get that fine line of as long as I tell you I'm not going to be there, then you can't kick me out because it was an excused absence. So if there is something that may need to be clarified, I would think it would be in the absences what is considered excused and non-excused.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. I think this was in part brought forward because of the attendance issues. So maybe, I'm in agreement with our speakers that have come. The lottery process is unbiased, or as unbiased as we can possibly be. So I think maybe clearing up the attendance policy and how that process takes place, because that's not just an issue on Measure R. That's an issue across the board on a lot of our commissions. So maybe taking a look at that might be a better direction, for us to go on this particular item. So
And it could be just a suggestion too to think about is when there is members that are absent. I know in other cities, the next meeting, those committees or commission vote to excuse as a whole those absences, either say it is excused or non-excused absence. So it's as a whole for the committee, it's documented in the minutes, and then the council can also see that in the minutes of who was absent, was it excused or not. So just something to think about if you do want to agendize this coming back in that manner.
Catherine.
Yes, I agree with the speakers. One thing I just wanted to clarify on the attendance is our municipal code says it applies to every single commission. If you miss 3 meetings consecutively or 5 meetings within a year, a letter is supposed to be brought to the council regarding that spot has been deemed vacant. And so I asked Dina previously in the last few years, have any of those letters, has the council gotten a letter? And the answer was no, because again, the only requirement is that someone, and it's supposed to be in writing, which my understanding is that might not be happening. They might be phone calls, but it's supposed to be in writing that someone is going to be absent. So my 2 recommendations would be, 1, to make it, I think we need to clean up the code in terms of making it clear what excused is versus unexcused, because right now, as long as people are calling in, they're missing. There are some folks that have missed a number of meetings, and if that's the issue, we need to take care of that. And the other one is to change the frequency. So the example of like Measure R meets quarterly. So if you were to miss, 3 meetings, that's 3/4. If they weren't consecutive, technically you're in compliance with this. And so I think the frequencies or the absence rate needs to correlate with how many times the committee meets, so that that option isn't present for a committee that meets 4 times a year versus one that's meeting 12 times a year.
Greg?
As Robin said, that I think this came about with concerns over some of the attendance that we had with some of the commissions, and I think with any of the commissions, there's, excused absences, but there's also extenuating circumstances. And Kevin, you remember, and I know some of you in the audience, when Donna Johnson was on Streets and Trails, and they had her hip replaced, and she took all the screws that were out of her hip and basically threw them at Harvey Sullivan because he wanted her removed. When meetings were a lot more fun. And but part of it is, and a couple of the comments that was insinuated was that we just appoint our buddies and our friends and all of that, and I take, you certainly have a right to your opinions, but there's certainly, you need to look at maybe a little more of the history. Like our planning commission, we just appointed 2 new residents to town to the planning commission, and both are very well qualified. I don't think any of those 2 are running buddies, and so I think there's just a little more to that. When Measure R was on the ballot, that was during Kevin and I, we ran along with Measure R. And in the very beginning, I was not supportive of Measure R just because it's not a big fan of taxes. And, after consideration and what Measure R could do for our community, that is when I came out and supported Measure R. And one of the promises that I made the residents, and the bigger promise that I made myself, to myself, was that I certainly agreed this should be by the lottery and by committee, okay? And that council would be basically hands-off on that. And I still believe that's my promise to the residents. There are some advantages, though, to appointments, but I think specifically with Measure R, I'm going to stay with the promise that I made myself and the promise that I made the residents in order to support Measure R, and that is to leave it as a lottery. Thank you.
So I think this was a discussion that had to be held. You know, I too kind of bridle at some of the comments. I can't see putting my friends on council so I can fix another road. Right now we're fixing more roads than any time in the history of the city. But understand, this is a commission where we already have a history of, as Greg pointed out, appointing a lot of people who are new we don't know. But the reality is they're handling millions of dollars. Millions. And if we're not watching, guess what? Then we're just stupid. And this is not a stupid council. We're guilty of a lot of things, but that's not one of them. So when we review these committees and these commissions, they have a purpose and a form and a function. And one of the things you have the advantage of is that a lot of you haven't been around a long time, Norva has. You're looking at probably 60 years of commission experience. And that has to be respected. I insist. So I don't have a problem keeping the lottery system, and here's the joke of the whole thing. Having the lottery system makes it easier for me, because many times people stand at the podium that want to be on that particular committee, and I go, oh my God, I'm glad I have a lottery. Get involved. It probably isn't the committee for you to be handling millions of dollars in a city like Norco. Get involved. Go to the fair, sell tickets. Get involved. You know, there is no good old boys club. That's a lie. The good old boy club is if you volunteer and help. All of a sudden you're in the club because people depend on you. They don't care what you look like. They don't care what you do. All they care about is, will you be that person that's going to help me on the back gate of the Norco Fair? Will you be the person that's going to be standing at the gate when those girls holding the flags are going to go through that gate? Will you sell tickets? Will you do the stuff? And I thought Robin was very eloquent tonight. Mark Moore is one of those guys that you can absolutely depend on. And unfortunately, there's a mentality that just, if you're not let in immediately right at the top, people sit there and go, wow, oh, it must be them that's the problem. So I'm just as happy to keep it the way it is. I don't have a problem at all. Again, it makes it easy for me. So do we have to make a motion, or we just leave it as it is?
Well, could we send it back to ask for recommendations to update the ordinances in terms of attendance, clear and unclear, and looking at the frequency of absences? John, can we ask for that within this?
John, we can include that in the motion to keep it as the lotto and then come back with the attendance changes. Okay.
So I'll make a motion to maintain the current recruitment process that we have for Measure R, but ask that staff please bring back looking at the ordinance of changing the frequency of how many absences are allowed depending on how often the commission meets, and looking at what is a acceptable absence or not. I think language in the ordinance that excused or unexcused, what have you. Yeah, I'm missing the official word right now.
Any other comments? Let's go to a vote.
Yeah.
Come on, Dana.
I'm playing all the music instruments over here. Just real quick, before we do vote, I would like to take a couple meetings before I bring this back, because I'd like to go out to our listserv to some of our cities to see what their verbiage is on their absences, and also how they handle their, what they find acceptable for excused and unexcused. I just want to make sure that that's okay with you. Okay, thank you. Please vote. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Moving on to 5B, direction from the City Council is the role of the George A. Ingalls Veterans Memorial Executive Committee and the George A. Ingalls Development Committee and formalization as standing committees to align with current committees, commissions, and advisory council. Mr. Petrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. At your last meeting, you brought forward a discussion topic for us to look at these two subcommittees that have been in existence for a number of years, and to look at them being formalized or positioned as standing committees to align with our other current committees and commissions. Staff has added information here related to both those committees, their history, what their functions have been in the past, as well as taking a look at some of the items in which each of them look at and prepare information to be brought back to council for approval when we look at either capital projects or other items. The Veterans Committee, and going back and look, was appointed originally by the mayor, and Dana has identified that that has been done as an appointment in the past. However, one of the items is do we want to formalize this and make it a standing committee? And Dana and I had a long talk about this, because what it does is when you, and maybe she can explain it a little bit better than I can, but if you set this as a standing committee, then you're subject to the Brown Act and a lot of other regulations related to that, as far as dedicated staff, minutes, posting, various other things. So then rules need to be applied to that, in which then, if that's the case, the council would like to go that direction, then we would then bring back a resolution formalizing those committees, versus more of an advisory committee, which is kind of the way we have set it up in the past. And Dana, you and I had a talk. Anything you want to add to that? All right, so it's really up to discussion with you. Staff will do whatever the council wishes.
If I can just ask just a question. Forgive me, council, for stepping in first. Has there ever been a time, and it's just a question, point of information, that anything approved via the Veterans Memorial Committee, or when we were developing the memorial to begin with, that didn't go before council for approval?
Anything related to capital or changes came before the council.
Okay. Bring it back to council. Want to start with you, Greg?
I don't really know. It's I've never had any heartburn about this just being a committee. It's kind of concerning that if we were to change anything and make it more of a commission, and then additional staff time, minutes, Brown Act violations, I think that still creates, more additional burden on staff. How often does the committee meet? Once a month.
And as needed.
But it's just advisory. And like you had asked, Kevin, no decisions, are made. I would take it as recommendations. Everything comes to council as far as funding. I don't know. I don't have that much at this point. I don't have much heartburn about the way it is.
And what about the Ingalls Development Committee?
Kind of the same. Brian Petrie, I know we can't repeat this in public, is the Hal Clark quote, that if you looked at the information on the Ingalls Park Committee, I mean, those names of Hal Clark, Mike Montgomery, Maud Ingalls, this committee is kind of the essence of our community, and it's always been, once again, advisory. I don't really see a need to make it all formalization. I think there's still transparency. That committee is not spending money. Council authorizes the money. I just don't have much heartburn with it. And like I said, especially with Ingalls Park, that's a lot of just our fabric of the community. I don't believe it's broke. Why mess with it?
One of the things that as you looked at over the years, those participants, is that as we approved the master plan and started looking at it, there were gaps in time when we would meet because we didn't have any funding.
Right.
So then part of that, as we developed funding, the idea of meeting and having a vision and working with all of the various community groups who've been part of that master plan is really important. That's part of our outreach, our community outreach, and really navigating on what we really envision that facility to be after we build it completely out. The other part of that is that over time, and we've been working on Ingalls for probably 40 plus years, is that sometimes people, so it's more of a working group, but yet I've had people who have left, some are in heaven now. I mean,
right.
You can see over the time those people, and we're always encouraged to work with those community groups. In fact, as our commission and as two representatives I've had council be on there, they've always been part of our outreach to meet with groups and talk about, from our small horse clubs to our large community events, for getting staff feedback to really try and plan out. Ingalls is a big part of this community, always has been. So from a staff position, I've always felt it was really needed for staff to have that conversation so that we do it right. And if you don't do it right, you could step in something very easily at Ingalls and do it wrong. So it's really important to get that feedback, and that's the way we've always envisioned it to be used and done that way.
Thank you. That's all I have at this time.
Catherine?
I'm going to disagree with you, Greg. Yeah. I think public perception is really important, even if the public does not have the perception that may be necessarily what's truly happening. And I think transparency is important as well. And, as a council person, we don't always know what everybody's doing. And I think it's important that we do. And for instance, the Veterans Committee, how would someone know about it? If somebody moved here, how would you know when it met? How would you know when to go? This isn't something you could find out easily on our website like you can the Planning Commission or the Parks and Rec Commission. The same for the Ingalls Commission. At our last meeting was really the first time. There's another committee that's meeting and discussing things. And the reason that it came up on the agenda, so John, could you clarify, because what I heard at our last meeting was that if we have two council members on a committee or a commission, like the longstanding veterans one, that it should be formalized because of the law. Could you clarify? My understanding's correct or not?
I guess that we've used the term advisory a few times. Every commission is advisory. The Planning Commission is an advisory commission of the City Council. When it becomes an issue is when essentially the City Council is advising themselves. If you want to have two council members on a commission, then you set up an ad hoc committee, which is, I think, is what this originally was done. It was intended to be ad hoc, meaning you have a specific subject matter and a task, and when the task's done, then it's ended. What's happened is it's morphed into time over something which is continued to be ongoing. If it isn't, as Brian said, if it's an advisory commission, committee to staff, which some of these have been, the Measure R original, for example, then there's not quite the need to formalize it because staff takes the responsibility of running it and selecting and discussion and passing on the recommendation to the city council. If on the other hand you want to have more people involved formally, then you are going to have to formalize it. And as been suggested, the Brown Act and regular meetings and those kinds of things.
But so that wasn't clear for me.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah. So in your legalese, I started out and then I thought, okay. So what does that mean?
What I'm saying is essentially, if you want to continue doing what we're doing now in terms of format, you're going to have to formalize it.
Okay.
If you want to make it clear that it's intended to be an advisory committee that essentially functions through the city manager, assistant city manager's office, deputy city manager's office, then you really don't need to do too much other than indicate that's going to be the case.
Okay. So we're just doing questions now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think those would be my questions for now. Thanks, John.
Robin?
So on questions for Brian, when these advisory committees or whatever meet, the product of their meetings, are there minutes, are there agendas, or is it feedback to staff and then staff takes a direction and completes something?
In some cases, like for example, the Veterans Committee, we meet once a month and we do have an agenda. A lot of the agenda is about the activities or programs that we host at the Veterans Memorial. Who's going to volunteer to do what? Who's going to do this? Who needs to do this? What is staff's role going to be in that process? Who's going to be the guest speaker? So it is, a lot of the meetings are based on that. The policy process that we came up with was really about formalization and really military standards, and that's what they help a lot with, and that's why there was so much discussion about when do you salute, when does the flag go here, and so we had to have some way of making sure we followed some protocol, because from a staff step, many of us we didn't serve. And so it was really important to hear from our veterans in that way. They also go through a vetting process, and originally when this was started, the vetting process was, in the discussion early on, was that council didn't want to be part of who goes on the wall. They didn't want that to be perceived politically. So the veterans vet that and look at their DD 214. They look at.
They did approve the rules, though.
Yeah, well, in concept, and then that policy was created. But we wanted to make sure that there was a process in which who goes on the walls, and so that's really a big part of what that committee does. They even discuss fundraising and how could we raise money to help, you know, the memorial and do more stuff, or education in the community. The Ingalls Committee has met over the years and not met over the years. And a lot of that has been driven when we had a project or we had funding to have a project. And there were years where we didn't meet at all. And then we did meet to start to do things and look at projects and how that goes, and then also use them to talk to our users to make sure we're on the right path. But as far as a formal process for we're taking minutes, no. Do I keep some notes? Yes. We bring those up at the meetings. If we're looking at a project in the future, we keep notes for projects, potential construction costs, things like that. But at some point, that would still have to come back to the council for approval to become a project, and then that project to be implemented through our capital improvement program. So basically very informal, but yet we do not keep minutes, do not keep notes, although I do keep information about what we're working on and what we're looking at, and that's about as far as we go.
If a resident wanted to attend one of these meetings, like let's say somebody does flowers for events on the regular and wanted hooks on the wall, how would somebody know to go to the Veterans Committee meeting when it was going to take place, how they might address that committee?
Typically, they would contact our office and we'd say we meet the first Monday of every month. at 5 o'clock, come on by and let's talk about that. We've had a little of that. We haven't had a lot. We don't necessarily post all of that, and that's something we can always do, but we don't necessarily advertise that. But when we've had calls or we've had stuff where people have sent us stuff, and we'll put it on the agenda. Here's something someone suggested we look at doing. Or what about hosting this type of veteran activity? We work really close with the American Legion. We feel there's a real partnership with that. And so we talk about the American Legion, we share information, and then the other groups that we have, the committee a long time ago felt there needed to be an education, so we engaged the Norco ROTC program, and we've kind of fathered them into into the committee, and they've been really a good source of information. Plus, they volunteer a lot of hours at the Veterans Memorial. We've been very close with all the scout troops too. Then we kind of feel there's a real thing. The newer groups are both the sheriff's cadets and fire cadets too. And then the other organization is in the last couple of years, we've been engaging the college and their veterans program, because we really want to be about veterans. As an example, we hosted a breakfast, this is a couple years ago, for veterans. We had someone from the veterans office come in and talk about health and we invited a bunch of veterans over who benefits may not be there, but we opened a door for them to have that opportunity, and we had a breakfast just to say thank you for your service. And that was done all by volunteers, all donated, whatever, and the Veterans Committee just put the time in to help host that for some of our veterans and community. So they really want to be more of that outreach and service group to our veterans. But as far as formalization, we have not done it like a regular commission. It's been more of a sub or ad hoc process.
Ted?
Well, being a member of both, these things go to my heart. And when I got on council, I was the only veteran on the council. Berwin Hanna volunteered to come off so I could go on there, on the Veterans Committee. I can tell you right now, the Veterans Committee, we recruit veterans to be on it. If the veterans don't show up or retire from it or move out of the area, we find another veteran to take their place. We've been lucky is that we also have two of our parks commissioners sit on there, because that's important that they relate, because Memorial is on our park. So we have them on there. I've got a gentleman sitting in the audience here that he was so involved with the Boy Scouts, we had to have him on because he was also a parks commissioner. And we brought him back on. Why? Because he's a very integral part of the community in his knowledge, and he volunteers a lot of time up there and volunteers that stuff. It's advisory. He knows that. The other guys that are on there, advisory. And it's like Brian was saying, we developed the protocols and procedures up there for the veterans. We had to come up, we had a little running feud a couple of years back, on how we were going to do the continual salute. We came up with protocols. This is how we're going to do it. That's what we do on the advisory committee. Most of it, everything to do. Kevin's vetting on things. I'm glad he's getting somebody to help him, because it's tough. He's got to go through all that vetting for the wall and take and research, and it's not easy. You're not just looking at DD Form 214. You're pulling medical records for guys that died from Agent Orange. You're looking into history, and you got to go through the DOD for that. We changed our flag policy. Why? Because I looked at the DOD reg when somebody said something to me. Whoops, we were doing it wrong. So we changed it. It's advisory. But the guys up there, and it's very difficult, because most of the veterans up there, depending on, not all of them make all the meeting. And Brian forgot about the Blue Star mothers that are now they come in, and again, there's another advisory section for them since we created the Gold Star Family Monument. It's advisory. They're telling us what they do and want. I mean, I respect those women as far as what they put into it. As far as the master plan goes, Brian, it's been around since Ray Odell was the parks director. I was on that one. I represented the Norco Mounted Posse Rodeo. I was the first chairman. They wanted to know what to do. That was before there was a cover. And we used to have to bring everything in. It's changed. It's slowly changed over the years as far as the involvement. At that time, you hardly got any council members at all that wanted to be part of it. They didn't want to be it. They just want to hear the bottom line because it is what it is. And so that's evolved as far as council members and the master plan. The master plan came out for Ingalls Park. Was that the one we held with the college, Cal Poly, when they first put it together?
The master plan that Cal Poly put together was for the general park master plan for the whole city.
But then master plan came up along for Ingalls, and I mean that was put together by a group.
Yeah, there was an original vision committee 25 years ago that made up 23 different residents that the council actually appointed, and that committee stayed on what is the vision and all of that, and then eventually, and it was really nice, but there was no funding to do any of those things. So you would take little baby steps, and then something would get done, and then that went to a master plan committee, in which, at the time, the council said we really need to take it to the next step. And so we worked with a variety of different people on coming up with the master plan and the use, and then due to lack of funding, and then eventually Measure R, we've been more busier to try and think about, well, okay, what projects can we do to finish this master plan? And by the way, the master plan, even when we originally looked at this, I think it was $10.7 million to build it out all at one time. But we all knew that was never going to happen. So it had to be something that we looked at, and the best way to eat this elephant is a bite at a time. And it has a master plan is really a visual guide or roadmap. It will change and adjust based on how you start to develop that facility.
Let's get back though to the subject.
Well, and that's what I'm saying.
Because let me.
I'm just showing a history of it, John.
Oh no, I understand that, but that notwithstanding, the issue really is whether this is subject to the Brown Act or it's not. That's the only issue as a practical matter you're dealing with tonight. Simply stated, if it's advisory, if it's not established by the city council and it's advisory to staff essentially forms it, then it's not subject to the Brown Act. But let me read to you the Brown Act. A commission, committee, board, or other body of a local agency, this is the definition of a legislative body for the purpose of Brown Act, whether permanent or temporary, decision-making or advisory, created by charter, resolution, formal action of the legislative body, is a legislative body and subject to the Brown Act. However, advisory committees composed solely of members of the legislative body that are less than a quorum are not legislative bodies. That's the ad hoc committee. But it's just then 2 council members. And except that standing committees of the legislative body, irrespective of their composition, which have continuing subject matter jurisdiction or a meeting schedule fixed by ordinance resolution, are legislative bodies. I mean, the bottom line is what we're doing now, then that's why this came up last time. The way we're doing it now, you're a legislative body for the purposes of the Brown Act, and so the provisions of the Brown Act apply, and we need to establish in the municipal code the rules. I mean, for example, appointing members or not appointing members. There's no rule which says that you have to have 5 members or 7 members or 12 members, or that they have to serve terms or appointments. I mean, we can do it almost anybody who shows up and wants to participate can. But we're going to have to formalize it in terms of the Brown Act if we continue going down the path that we've gone now.
Formalize it, which means back to minutes and recordings.
Well, Minutes, not necessarily, but probably. But what it means is that it's open. It has to be noticed. It's open to the public. Public has the opportunity, even if they're not on the commission, to make public comments, like we do here. And essentially, it's the open meeting issues that are the Brown Act, which means publication of the meetings and notice to the public. I mean, it's not onerous. It's just open. You can't meet at a coffee shop and shoot the breeze and decide what you're going to do.
Let me ask you this.
Yep.
All right. So strictly an advisory committee, as we've had it, strictly just advisory committee. And now you're saying because we have 2 council members on that.
No,
Okay.
No, the 2
So
council members don't really make much difference. What makes the difference is that if it's a committee created by the council, which by definition is advisory, that it needs to be formalized. 2 council members, which was the first time I'd heard that, makes it a little dicier, and I can't say that I have much of an impression, but my general impression of what the committee quote was that it was a council person who was interested and a bunch of citizens meeting and among themselves making it, not established by the city council, but among themselves making decisions and making suggestions to staff and ultimately to the council. That's okay. It's when it's a committee which is formed by the council and is under the jurisdiction of the council that it becomes problematic. And it's not, and it's, like I said, not really a function. I mean, you could appoint the committee, 2 council members could be on the committee. You can't have a quorum, but you can have 2 council members. But if it's going to continue to be informal, the only way of doing that is it's not formal, which means that it reports to staff and it's a group of citizens that aren't appointed and by the city council, and the committees aren't appointed by the city council.
Okay, because none of our veterans committee are appointed by city council.
Yeah, and and if you established, I mean, if it's a city veterans committee, you can establish membership by basically saying anybody who has a ticket and comes in the door can participate, or be a quote member. Just because in other situations we either have the council appoint members or have a lottery, doesn't mean that that's how the membership has to work. It's not so much the membership as the issue, it's the formality of regular meetings, which you have already, and notice and the opportunity for the public to participate.
Making it difficult. Okay, so that's on the. I understand.
Yeah.
Now the master plan committee for Ingalls, and now because you're saying it's 2 council members on there, and that was okay. None of us were appointed. We just got the position.
Yeah, it just morphed.
Robin grabbed. We recommend.
It just morphed.
Yeah,
we were interested.
And now, if you want to formalize that with 2 council members, and the master plan is something which appears to be a single subject matter task, you can form an ad hoc committee composed of and it's not necessarily subject to the Brown Act.
Okay. So we really should be separating these 2 rather than trying to do this all under one.
Or you put, I mean, I don't really know, or you combine the 2, and
the 2 won't work together.
Yeah,
won't work the same. I kind of like Gray. We didn't have a heartache. We started. Just
yeah. And as I said, if it hadn't come up at the last meeting and somebody asked a question, we wouldn't be having this discussion. But nonetheless, the way it's working now would appear to be, since the city council. Well, the question has the city council ever formally formed this committee? And I think the answer is no. In which case,
which committee are you talking about?
either one of them.
Yeah. No.
And that's key number one. It has to be something which is created by the city council by resolution or ordinance. If it's not, then it's a group of people meeting.
I mean, Ted was put on the committee because he's the only veteran. I do it because I'm the sucker that does all the paperwork.
That's the key. I know that's the key, though. That created the initial problem. It's the Ted was put on, meaning that he was appointed.
No, he just
no.
He just,
I thought that there was a comment earlier that that this was a
the only thing. What was formed was the development committee to build it. And
the original committee, when we went back and looked, there was a mayor appointed originally the group.
It's
very vague, but
it's very vague, and that's what I'm still struggling with too.
Yeah. And if
say it was a
well, there was
formal
only four of us: you,
legislative
me, Jeff
action.
Cahan, and Berwin.
but a lot of our subcommittees were appointed. I asked for that assistance, so it wasn't driven by council.
Well, and if
It appeared to be a subcommittee or ad hoc.
Yeah, if it's
more
not formally
than anything.
If it's not formally a city council committee, then it's not subject to the Brown Act, and that committee, whoever is a member of it, figures out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it themselves. And if they want to come to the city council and annually make a presentation or whenever they think is appropriate, they can do that. But the city has no control over any of those things. Which is one of the reasons why some committees in the past we've treated as advisory to the city manager.
And the way the Veterans Committee has always worked is that veterans, truthfully, it's not like we go out and pick certain veterans. We're looking for warm bodies that happen to serve. And they stick, and a lot of them don't stick, and you don't even have to be a veteran to belong to it. I also don't vote on anything. So when
Again, the only time that you voting or not voting it wouldn't create a problem, generally speaking anyway, but the only time it even conceivably could is if the city council, had formed the committee and had some control over what it did.
And I think that's really what the discussion about tonight was. Are we going to form committees pertaining to the Ingalls Development Group and pertaining to the Veterans Group?
And if you don't want to, then then you don't appoint anybody. It's a group of citizens meeting and
What about the advisory capacity that they're advising staff? How does that?
the advising staff is okay. It's the advising council that.
But sometimes recommendations come to council from.
Sure. Again,
But someone should come and present, no?
as long as or through staff. We've done that with a number of different types of subject matters that Andy will say I need, or Brian will say I need some advice on this subject, and ask people in the community to join and do that. And that's fine. That's not a Brown Act committee.
If the veterans, can we advertise on the city website for both these committees that, they're going to be meeting on, December 15th and everybody's welcome? Can you do that, or is that necessary?
Oh, yeah, sure. You can say, just like you can advertise.
Because we want people to know what's going on.
Yeah, you can advertise any community event, so, that's not that much different.
Okay.
John, I have a question. On the Ingalls Veterans Committee, it is on our list of committees and commissions that the City Council sits on that is approved at the end of each year, and those appointments are made. So that, to me, is that our mayor is appointing those two members to that.
And
that is on our list right now, currently, that is reviewed annually.
yeah, and the only way of being able to, I don't know. I suppose that if it was, that you could authorize somebody, a member of the council, to attend those meetings, but without making it formally a committee. But anybody can attend them. And if, if it was Kevin or Ted or Robin, you showed up at a council meeting and your report said, hey, I met with this group and here's what we did, that's okay. Then you have a
Then one
quorum.
person has to
You
leave.
have a quorum, we're in trouble. Right.
Then one person has to leave, right?
Yeah.
If somebody shows up to be a guest, then one of us has to leave.
Yeah, you
All
can't,
right.
your quorum can't discuss city business,
All right.
What
Oh.
if they're not discussing city business?
just by definition is city business.
Say that again.
The subject matter here is by definition
No,
city
at
business.
the veterans meeting, the veterans committee meeting. If they are not discussing city business, can there be 3 council members attending?
Well, I said by definition, I think that this subject
Okay, so
matter
then no.
is city
Okay.
business.
I have a question, then a clarifying question. So Robin Grunmeyer, the agriculture teacher at Norco High School that provides flowers for a majority of the events, would like to see a change at the memorial. How would Robin Grunmeyer go about having that happen if Ted and Kevin were serving on the committee?
It becomes, since it's something which I gather would have to come back to the council, that's particular.
I would disagree because it would be as simple as Robin Grunmeyer, the ag teacher, wants hooks on the walls to put flowers on so she's not fighting winds and stands and having her student work destroyed in inclement weather. So, and you laugh, but that's something I struggle with because right now there is no means for the ag teacher to go.
No, I wasn't chuckling about that. I was
take
chuckling
care of
about
that.
that it's a somewhat of a conundrum, particularly
exactly.
under the current Brown Act, which doesn't allow council members to communicate other than in public meetings, essentially.
John, if Robin was there as a community member, she's not making the decision to put the hooks on the wall. She's not.
That doesn't make any difference. She's wherever Robin is, she's a council member. Yeah. Sure.
I'd be happy. I'd go. But hypothetically speaking, what I might be doing just for the heck of it is going out and buying 6 stands that are wind resistant. But I can't tell her that.
Well, and again, if I suppose you'd prefer to do it personally, but if you sent a letter saying I need these, that's okay. But it's not. You're not sending it either on behalf of the city or to the city.
Okay, that doesn't make sense. Then I'm going to throw one other little stick in the mud.
Well, no, meaning you're not sending it on behalf of the city, and you're not sending it to the city. Meaning,
Oh, because I'm sending it to an advisory committee.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got you there. So the other thing, Dana brought up the list of approved committees. So unload is on there. So my assumption would be that there would be minutes and agendas and
well, again, we're
records.
back to the same discussion,
But that's why I'm throwing it out there
Yeah.
because I'm the chair of that committee and I make agendas and I keep the minutes
Oh.
for what? Because they don't go anywhere. So what, you know what I mean? So what's the point? And I think it's the same situation as the 2 that we're discussing right now.
Yeah, and as I said, I don't think that there's any legal problem with authorizing, appointing, however you want to characterize it, a member of the council to attend any of those types, unload, or whether it's, or this one, simply as attendance, as long as it's not a city council committee. That, you're not going to be putting members on, removing members, telling them what they got to talk about.
But you're the chair, right, Robin?
Yes, I'm the chair. So then the question would be, the only way unload is a quote-unquote city committee, by your definition, if I am understanding correctly, is that there was an ordinance or resolution that formed that particular
some
group.
action by the city to form it.
Years ago.
Even appointing someone to it is what I heard you say?
Well,
that just starts a precedent?
That's the gray area. I think that you,
Okay.
Yeah, you can't appoint the members, but you could authorize on behalf of the city a council member to attend or.
But what if they're the chair?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Okay.
On your list, Dana, is LAFCO still on there? Which is not a city board. I was appointed by,
Well,
I know, but I was,
LEFCO is subject to the Brown Act.
correct, but I'm just saying,
There's the WR-COG, there's the LAFCO, there's all
LAFCO
the
one though
WCE.
is not there is not a position on LAFCO for the city of Norco. It is nothing. My position on LAFCO came out of the League of Cities when they voted as the alternative.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that shouldn't even be on her list because it's not a position that this council has any authority at all to appoint anything.
What we do with regard to that is fine. So one, it's subject to the Brown Act no matter what.
Okay, but I'm just...
And two, that, there are a lot of county-wide committees that some council member is appointed on behalf of the city to attend. That's fine. That's not the issue. The issue is whether or not what you're doing is formed by the city and whether, therefore, it's subject to.
But what I'm getting at, on her list, there's that list is there. So that list needs to be changed because LAFCO's got nothing to do with the city because that's not how it was appointed.
Like only the ones that are appointed, we appoint each other should be on that list is what you're saying, right, Councilman Hoffman? Yeah. He was appointed on that, not from council. So that could be on a separate list that just shows what other boards we serve on, because that would be good information to know, honestly. But it wouldn't be on the ones in which we appoint each other. I would like to know that, right? I mean,
that's also transparent for the community.
Let's go back to LAFCO then. Are you appointed by the city as a city? How are you involved with?
Mayor approves that list each year.
Yeah, but that is one. It's like I belong to a state, Cal Cities. The city doesn't appoint me. I'm appointed either by the Aaron Sassy and the League of Cities,
then really,
that's
if you
the same
have
as his.
Yeah, that really isn't then in the list, which apparently is appointees. Some of it is just information about Kevin is doing this.
You have to be appointed WRCOG to sit on the admin finance, which are appointed by the executive committee, but that's not on the list. But the appointment to WRCOG is.
On the other hand, what we're doing there really doesn't make any difference. Whether it's the list is right or wrong really doesn't make any difference. The only issue that we're discussing now is Brown Act versus non-Brown Act.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Can I ask clarification then? Because that list is given to the incoming mayor, and the mayor can make changes, and then we vote to approve that list submitted by the mayor. So how is that not city appointed?
Oh, it is city appointed. That's not what I said. It's not a city-created commission.
So you're going back to resolution or ordinance only then?
Yeah, just the only discussion tonight is something which is city formed or not formed. I mean,
let's go ahead and go to public comments. I'm going to open public comments. Do you have any cards?
Yes, we do. The first is Jeff Cahan.
Nobody
evening,
said
Council.
Nobody said the Brown Act was fun.
Yeah, I wish I had more than 3 minutes. Real quick correction on the policy paper. It says December 5th, 2013. It was actually December 5th, 2012. So the committee's been in existence a year longer. Kevin, if you remember, that was the night my son donated the first $1,000, and you almost broke your leg running around coming to get the check. I was appointed onto that original committee because I was a member of the Parks and Rec Commission at the time. And just as a side note, when I did step down from that commission, it was because I knew that I had some health issues, and rather than leaving my seat open for 3 meetings, I simply resigned so that the seat could be filled and not have an empty seat. When my health was restored, I was blessed enough to get a transplant this year. I asked to be reinstated back to the Veterans Committee, which I was. So my question is, and I kind of Greg summed it up when he said, if it's not broke, why fix it? We've been doing really fantastic things there, and there's a lot of times when we plan a ceremony, for instance, after the meeting's over, I have to get on the phone and I have to call Kevin and I say, hey, what about this? Or I got to talk to Ted and I got to say, what about that? Or I got to call Brian and say, hey, maybe we need to, put something from here, 10 feet over there. If we're in the Brown Act, then I probably can't be communicating phone calls and emails with people over decisions that we're making. It's going to be at a ceremony, because now I have to do a 3-day notice. I have to have a public meeting just to make a motion to vote to put something over here instead of over there. There's a lot of ceremonial planning that the details can't be handled in a 1-hour meeting. So it doesn't seem like it needs to be fixed right now. There's nothing really wrong with what we've been doing. I think we've been doing a great job, and there's nothing that we're hiding. Everything's, public as far as, we try to, look, I was on the commission for 7 years. The only person that ever came was Bonnie. Okay, so having a commission that's open to the public and noticing it and advertising it doesn't necessarily mean people are going to come, doesn't mean people are going to care. So going through all that trouble just to open it up to the public, not that we're hiding anything, but it's just going to actually make it harder. I also sit on the Christmas committee. So does the Christmas committee have to become Brown Acted? And the same thing. Now all of a sudden, we can't make decisions on, are we going to put this vendor here or that vendor there? Or are we going to get this light tower?
Wow, because we're all involved in that one.
Yeah, but then we got to Brown Act it, and then we got to have minutes, and we got to, and that again, when you're planning ceremonies and events, a lot of stuff happens. I don't want to say under the covers like it's hiding, but I mean, you can't just wait for a monthly meeting to go over thousands of details. You handle it day by day by day, and there's so much communication and coordination that it kind of almost would make things so much worse. So again, so I know I'm out of time, but real quick, if you do this as a formal thing, then the other question I would have is, do all the committee members currently get kicked off and have to be reapplied, or do the current people still retain their positions until the next time that you need to rotate people in or out? That's the only thing I would think about to consider as you move forward.
We'll have John answer that after everybody's spoken, unless you want to do it now.
That's actually easy. It depends upon what the regulations are that you establish.
Okay.
The next speaker is Mike Thompson.
Informal. Just don't meet at City Hall. Get together at somebody's house or Bob's Big Boy. Keep government small. If you're going to make these things official, you're going to have staff time, the costs. Do the committee members all got to be paid? Here we go. Government keeps growing. You guys do a great job. If you have to, do it on somebody's patio, how much more informal can you get? So.
Thanks, Mike.
Again,
Any other comments?
Want to keep it the way it is, then we just make clear tonight that it is not a committee that is formed by the city, that it's a committee which acts and exists independently.
Any other comments?
I have no further comments.
We've got one over there. You'll have to fill out a card, sir. Get over here. Come on, we know that.
All day long. What about we go out there and we sell the bricks? Now, what does that come into the point where we go out there at the end of the ceremony, the start, we have the booth set up there and we're selling bricks? What does that fall under the category?
Nothing?
So I'm a vendor and.
Don, it means you're a member of the club. All right, any other comments? Close and bring back to council. Any comments? Any ideas? Any?
Question for Robin on unload. Do you said you take minutes and that? Do you take attendance?
Yes. So when Lieutenant Briddick was here, Renee would generate an agenda,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody in the meeting would take minutes and attendance, and then that would go back to the sheriff's department. But what happened with it beyond that, I do not know. After Lieutenant left, we had COVID and all these other things that have changed kind of the dynamics of the group and how we meet. And so I just am an agenda and minutes person. And so that's what I do and what I have. So.
But they don't go anywhere.
No, in my file.
Okay. The X file. Mike kind of brought up some of my thoughts, was that just more government. If you want to destroy something, add more government to it, okay? And John, I don't want you to add anything either. Just tell us, what do we have to do to leave it the same? To me, it's transparent enough. No, wait. Don't interrupt.
I was going to say that was my last comment.
Okay. We can put it on the website, all right?
Not a problem.
And leave it so that it's transparent, but we don't have to add staff time. We don't have to take attendance of veterans. Which one of you guys want to boot a veteran off the committee for missing meetings? Okay? Not me. So if we can just change the verbiage to call it either an ad hoc or whatever.
You want to do the opposite of that. What you want to do, if you want to keep it the way it is now, the motion is acknowledging that these committees are not formed by or city committees, and that they are independent in their actions.
Thank you. Sorry. Is there something that came out of that discussion there?
With
No?
that?
Yeah.
Oh, no, he just asked, but the staff is going to, well, that's okay.
Okay. Okay.
It's just not a
However,
city-formed committee.
the Ingalls Committee is. That is a city. To me, that's an ad hoc. Well, it was a formal committee. The formal committee has since dissolved, remaining people still meeting on it. To me, that fits the definition of an ad hoc committee.
No.
The Ingalls Development Master Plan Committee. I'm not talking about the Veterans
An ad hoc
Committee.
committee under the Brown Act is a committee which is composed solely of 2 members of the city council.
Ad hoc committees can have only 2. They cannot have any other members
But that doesn't mean that you can't solicit other people to participate.
Right. Well, and there's only been 2 council members, and there's been other members of commissions or
But-
staff or community.
But still, we're back to the same issue. I don't think that committee was never formed by the city.
Yeah, it was.
Was it?
The Ingalls Development Committee.
We have an ordinance which is
Not an ordinance, but it was formed as a like a community outreach, and then it's still meeting. So to me, what I see that is now its function as an ad hoc committee. I would, and what Andy's not here to speak for himself, but what I have heard from Andy is usually, and I heard it from you, John, so you're here. John said, ad hoc committees are usually formed with a specific purpose, a specific task, a timeline. They complete that task, and then the ad hoc committee dissolves. And should you need another ad hoc committee later to study the same issue, you reconvene. So to me, I would like to see with the Ingalls Committee, if we have, Councilmember Hoffman brought up at our last meeting, there are still things that we're looking at, what's in the master plan, what we want to get done, improvements that need to be done, then have that committee or form a committee to come up with the recommendations and a timeline for that, so that that's a finite thing and we have something to go off of. And then if that committee later, we need to come back to it because it's not set in stone, as Brian has said, it's flexible. There's this master plan that was done, and bite out of the elephant slowly, but that there's some transparency with who's on it, who's meeting, what's getting produced that's coming to council. Because it can seem...
Except an ad hoc committee is not subject to the Brown Act.
right? And it's not forming an official committee, but it's clear to everyone what it is, what it's doing, and the recommendations would come to council and it would be done. When there's a lot of committees doing things and that may be how things have been done, I think it's important to think about, are we doing them in a way that makes sense, that's legal, that's transparent, that everything's on the up and up. And so that's just what I know many of you have been up here a long time, but if I'm a council member and I don't fully see the big picture of all the pieces, then our residents aren't going to see that either. And so just asking for that transparency and wanting to know who's doing what, who's involved, and where that information is, so we are all on the same page, especially when we're answering questions and residents have questions, they want to know what's happening, we can refer them to those right people and get them the right answers.
Question, can an ad hoc committee make a presentation to council and let them know what's going on?
Actually, the ad hoc committee, which is composed by statutory definition, ad hoc committee is composed of 2 council members.
So
and they don't, and because they're investigating some specific subject matter, they're not subject to the public meeting notice and all those other things.
I mean, when the first Ingalls Park committee was put together.
Almost by definition, an ad hoc committee, when it reaches either as it goes along or when it reaches conclusion, does have to make a presentation to the council.
I mean, Frank and Hal are dead. I mean, that's how long ago that. I mean,
as Catherine said, Ingalls,
even before
if it was formed as an ad hoc committee, you're talking many, many years that ad hoc committee to see to the end, unless you're going to write a check for $15 million. That's not going to happen. So an ad hoc committee, even though it would have an end someday when you finish it, it's going to be going for many years.
Right. I'm saying we're hearing that we want things happening in Ingalls, and that you're asking that you ask for feedback on. So what are the things that we want done coming up with that recommendation so that it's all coming to council at one time? If that ad hoc committee needs to reconvene or reform in a year or two to make further recommendations because it's an ongoing project, then so be it. But there's a task that they're completing, it's finite, it's clear what's happening, it's coming to council, and then it's not just this committee that then it's like, what committee is that? Who's on that? What are they talking about? Where is it? So it's not clear. Well, it's not clear to me.
Either that or the other alternative is, as we've done, to keep it at a staff level, that it's within Andy's purview or the city manager's purview, and 2 council members could attend, and whoever else he thought was appropriate, and then whenever it's appropriate, make presentation to the council without it having to be subject to the Brown Act. And I mean, again, the Brown Act's a good thing, except that the Brown Act is absolutely the worst way to do business in the world.
And it kills creativity.
Yeah.
We never would have built the memorial if we had made because it just was difficult, even though everything was approved by council.
Yeah, so that just because it was, I guess, once formed as a, quote, ad hoc committee, whatever that meant at the time, doesn't mean that's the way it has to be today. In which case, then we're back to either you need to step out completely or give Andy the authority to do that job and make recommendations back to the city. And
what was the committee we did for the infrastructure 2 years? What was that, Brian? That was just an ad hoc?
It was an ad hoc, but it was appointed by the council.
We volunteered, which was the worst job I ever volunteered for. But we were eventually appointed, okay.
Yeah, but you had, I think each council member appointed 2 people.
And you appointed the members as well.
And it was finished when we were done. So what is council's pleasure? Microphone.
When you go back to Ingalls Park, you got to go back to the initial building of that thing back in the 70s. John Cobb, Art Foster, those guys. The city council was there. In other words, the land was there, started to put an arena because they were going to lose Horseman's down here by where the 15 came through. The community center was going to be pushed back. You couldn't even use it anymore for the fair. You got to think of something, because major thing is the freeway went through, you lost Horseman's Park. So go up there on the hill and build Ingalls. I don't think anybody back, and there were thought about ad hoc committee what they were going to do. Everybody sat down there, probably over a cup of coffee or behind at the donut shop on 6th Street and on after and had a meeting. And they got things done. They got it done. Not over a formal stupid
Now there was no
meetings.
Brown Act then.
There was no Brown Act, but they got it done. And the more you put restrictions, I'll tell you, I'm like Greg, the more you get government get involved, the less people want to get involved. They don't want to go through it.
Well, again, the only requirement of the Brown Act, if you will, with regard to these types of committees, is that they have a meeting schedule and that their meetings are noticed, and that the public is allowed to attend and participate because we've told them when the meeting. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff is just surplusage.
So all we need to do is just put a little, hey, we're going to meet this day. Right? That's it.
You just have to do it in advance. I mean, you have to say it's every Monday, and here's where it's going to be, and here's what the agenda.
Well, come the first Monday of every month, we meet over there here at the city and have our Veterans Committee.
And,
the Master Plan Committee meets as needed. That's it.
And an agenda for.
And the agenda. Well, the good. I mean, I help with the agenda on every veteran, so just like
Our subcommittees, though, like for the veterans, do we have to post those too? Like for meeting, like I'm really intrigued by Robin needing her hook. I want to get her a hook. Can we talk about those kind of things? And like the Pearl Harbor Day, we're having a special meeting Monday about that. Because basically the LNCF is renting the.
Yeah, I mean, none of those are.
But you can do that.
Well, that's on our committee, though. It's on our agenda, John.
Okay.
So we're making this more difficult than what we need. And I'm not a state, but you know, people want, it's like Kevin said earlier, we had the discussion with, on the Measure R. You want to know how to get involved, then get involved.
Yeah,
Come to the meetings, find out what's going on in town, and at the same time.
You're right. But the flip side of that is, and I think is kind of what Catherine was saying.
Where, when.
That, when and where. And who knows what, I mean, that's what city council, not this one in particular, but city council can criticize for, is doing these deals at the coffee shop without anybody knowing. Which resulted.
Unfortunately, that's how they did it way back in the 70s.
Which resulted in the Ralph Allen Brown Act.
Yeah, okay. But if we keep this simple, and it's some things are, it comes to a point, if it's not broke, don't try to fix it, because we're screwed. We're going to make it harder. And if it just means advertising them, we'll advertise them. That's the way I look at it. But there's no reason to get so formal with this stuff.
Or you treat it as a citizens committee.
So I'll make a motion that the Ingalls Veterans Committee henceforth be a citizens committee, and that the Ingalls Master Plan Committee move under the purview of the city manager to meet as needed.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do I hear a second? Robin seconds. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I hate to do this and ask a question to John. Is there a nexus? Our city has a general plan, and all that is the overall development, generally speaking, for the city, okay? Ingalls Development Committee, is that kind of the same thing? It's that this is just a blueprint. It's a guideline on where we want to see ourselves in 5, 10, 20 years down the road. I mean, can things be that simple?
Well, the forming the general plan and amending it, no, that's not simple.
No, not. I'm just saying,
but
it's still a guideline. Okay, there's nothing specific in that.
There's specific
Well, there
enough
is
that
and there
any-
isn't,
that everything you do under the underlying zoning and everything else has to comply with it. But again, in terms of the master plan type committee, if it's through Andy, no. I mean, there's no Brown Act issues at all.
Okay.
If it's a citizens master plan committee, which is, I would think, somewhat more difficult to do because that really functionally is the city. You can pretend it's not, but that's really probably not a citizens committee, literally, because they wouldn't be doing that. Probably the better way, I think, is Catherine's motion, is that it be formed and report to the city manager.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Any other discussion? And let's have a vote.
At least everybody stays awake.
Mayor, please vote.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's the air.
All right.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Moving on to 6, public hearings. Order of presentation for public hearing items. 1, staff report presentation. 2, council questions of staff. 3, open public hearing. A, public comments. 4, closed public hearing. 5, council discussion and action. 6A, ordinance number 1077, first reading.
I'll let Matt know, yeah, please. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the time to bring this item forward. This item was previously discussed in November 2020. Originally, staff had attempted to bring forward a discussion about memorializing all the parking restrictions in the city. Staff came to realize that really most of our parking limitations around the whole city have never been adopted formally. There's only a few that have been formally adopted that staff could actually find, but we obviously have a lot of parking, no parking signs in various locations around the city. And one of the things we are obligated to do in order to enforce those, especially providing tickets, is to identify they actually been formally approved by the city council. So one of the endeavors that I took on to was to document all those parking restrictions that we currently had, make recommendations to modify some of those that maybe need to be changed to improve processes, and add some that really I felt were needed in order to protect and to ensure public safety. At that time in November 2020, it was brought before council for discussion. For the most part, those items were generally benign, but there was an issue that was of concern brought up by Mayor Pro Tem Newton, which was staff's recommendation, which is still in this recommendation for you, which was to make Hamner Avenue, which mostly is no parking anytime, except for a minor section that's formally adopted and approved by council by ordinance. It's all no parking anytime. There is a time limited parking between Auto Mall Way and 3rd Street. It used to be the whole Auto Mall zone area, but it got modified to where the 2 areas in front of Browning and Hemborg asked to have it removed. Mainly that was due to ADA compliance concerns. By having parking against the street, they were made aware they may have to make modifications to the sidewalks to allow folks that may want to visit proper access. And so ultimately that was brought back to council, which council removed that section but kept the remaining. And the reason staff was bringing it forward to potentially change it to all no parking was because there is a couple areas along the eastern side of Hamner Avenue between 3rd and 4th that have signage that allows 1-hour parking that have not been approved. And staff, meaning me, have gotten numerous requests. When I say numerous, I shouldn't have said it that way. I said at least 3 different requests by businesses that wanted parking along the street because they didn't have sufficient parking inside their respective business. But we ultimately told them they couldn't because it's only allowed in a certain zone and it would have to be approved by council. And so those requests were denied. The concern by Mayor Pro Tem Newton was there going to be potential impact financially to those businesses that have the parking that might be removed, and what that might be. So it was asked and directed by staff to bring this item to EDAC, was the Economic Advisory Committee, to review it and get their opinion in general. Do they have any concerns about staff's recommendation to make all of Hamner no parking? Primarily, just to reiterate, staff's motivation regarding modifying it was really for two reasons: fairness to these other businesses that don't get that accommodation, and also with safety. We do have some issues with visibility when you're coming out of a driveway and you've got some of the large vehicles that Norco has in your truck. You have to really creep out into oncoming traffic, which is 40 miles an hour, to try to exit that area. It doesn't mean it can't be done, but it does pose a problem. So those are the primary two reasons. We did take this item to EDAC. Had a couple discussions with them in the meeting, and there was discussions for and against through that group. Ultimately, we even had a subcommittee that they asked to create between a couple members of EDAC and a couple members of this Streets, Trails, Utilities Commission, because primarily EDAC really felt that some of this area really is in the Streets, Trails, Utilities Commission's purview, and they wanted to get their opinion before making any final decision. That subcommittee did meet. Nothing formal really came out of it other than just healthy discussion about the pros and cons. It really is meant to give information to EDAC. Ultimately, EDAC didn't come out with a formal recommendation. Primarily, I think there was a majority for removing the parking in Hamner, but there was still some debate for a couple members about whether or not it was appropriate or if there was an impact. We did highlight with EDAC in that, and it's in the staff report, is that every business is by ordinance required to have sufficient parking on site for their employees and their customers. So if every business is in compliance, then we shouldn't have a need for on-street parking. But so ultimately, no formal recommendation was provided by EDAC. They were undecided. I did take this item again to the full Streets and Trails Utilities Commission to have them review that and staff's recommendation. At that time, I elected to modify my recommendation slightly to, instead of being no parking anytime, because I did recall some of the council's concern regarding delivery trucks and the ability for especially in the automall zone area, for the trucks to come deliver cars, etc. So I did modify a recommendation to no parking anytime except loading and unloading, so that you could provide that. Most of the trucks that get delivered end up doing it in the middle of the street when it comes to vehicles. Some do park on the side, and obviously some delivery trucks do park on the side, whether it's Amazon or other vehicles. They do that, and they'd be allowed to do that. The Streets, Trails, Utilities Commission voted unanimously to support that recommendation for those primarily two reasons, I believe, which was fairness to the other businesses and the existing requirements that make it mandatory to have parking on site anyway, and for public safety. And so bringing forward to you, I'm bringing forward that recommendation that's been modified since the original time, which is still no parking anytime in all of Hamner except for loading and unloading. There are some areas along Hamner that will be no parking anytime because they're simply not even wide enough to have safe parking along the road edge, even for deliveries. So we have delineated that in the attached maps that we provided. We did add, as part of an overall, just so for clarity, in the maps that we have and the index we provided that documents all the locations, we did add several areas of trails that we felt that weren't in the previous report in 2020, added those for no parking. A lot of that's in the Old Town area, where there's simply not enough road width adjacent to the trail to accommodate parking, because we were having repeat issues with folks parking half their car in and out of the street, and that 2 feet against the road edge where the trail fence is, and it actually, people would call the sheriff, and the sheriff was hit or miss about whether or not they could provide a ticket because it's not posted. You can't park there, even though technically by the vehicle code, if the officer feels that it's a danger because they're extended into the roadway, they can provide a ticket for basically blocking traffic. So part of this was trying to clean up some of that process. So we added more streets in this process, mainly against the trail where there is not enough parking to accommodate any reasonable parking at all. And it's primarily in those areas where there's no curb and gutter. It's the Old Town area. So I did add that area in there. There's several streets that we added in. That's for safety reasons. We do have a plan that I've been working on with staff that once this is approved, if it is approved, we're going to put up brand new signage throughout the city. And the signage will be threefold. It will have no I'm trying to consolidate so it'll be one sign taking on really three topics. In most cases, it's a sign that's going to say no parking any time for the block. It'll say no parking in trail with the municipal code on it, and it'll also remind people there are no motorized vehicles on the trail. So instead of having three separate signs creating this collage on a pole, we're trying to do one little bit larger sign that deals with everything, beginning and end of the block and in the middle, to where it reminds folks that you can't park along this road edge, you cannot park in the trail, and you cannot use motorized vehicles in the trails. Because that's that's become more prevalent, is motorized vehicles in the trails of all types that have been concerning the community, and we're getting a lot of reports on. So we want to make sure that we're documenting to the public that these activities are not allowed in these certain areas. And by doing one sign, I'm limiting per pole, I'm limiting the sign graffiti that we end up seeing, but putting all these signs out. But I think in the end it'll help communicate to the public that we do have some guidance and restrictions that's related to the trails. Let's see here. We did take the step of, and it was encouraged by through EDAC and actually through Stuck, that we make sure we notify all the businesses that might be impacted on Hamner, so that if we were going to make this change, that they knew about it, that we just didn't do it in a meeting they weren't aware of. So I did create a letter notice that was sent to all the businesses that currently have that parking along Hamner, indicating there was going to be this meeting and this discussion and staff's recommendation to remove that parking and just allow loading and unloading only. And that was delivered prior to this meeting, a week or so or more before this meeting occurred. I've only had one resident or business contact me on that with questions regarding what it means and how it's going to be implemented, etc. I am not aware of any direct communications that was provided to the clerk to provide to council on this topic. And so and that one person who did contact me was Tony Barreto. And his concern was, he understood the fairness part of it. He just had some concerns whether it should be implemented now, related to the business that's to his south that hasn't been developed yet. I tried to explain to Mr. Barreto that it really doesn't impact or have to do with the business next door, because the people that park there are parking perpendicular on private property. They own that property, and it's not in the right-of-way, in the roadway. Because the way we widened it, they're parking perpendicular in those couple spots in front of them in their property. They're not parking parallel with the street in front of there, because then there's a huge gap in there, because that's where their actual existing striped parking stalls are. So his thought is that the restriction or the sign shouldn't be removed until that lot develops, and then he thinks it's fair. So he indicated he was going to maybe contact one or two of you or provide information. I did recommend and encourage him to maybe, if he does do that, to contact all the councils so they're aware of maybe his concerns and his opinions. But I just want to acknowledge I did get one individual that did ask, and that's had some questions about it. And then this ordinance basically does do two things. It codifies all the requirements for the no parking. There is one element in there that deals with perpendicular parking. We've had that as an issue too on some of the residential roads, where we kind of have some extra wide parkways that are undeveloped. I mean, there's no trail there, but it's an extra wide parkway, and instead of folks parking parallel with the road, they're parking perpendicular, and some of them are literally in the road, or their bumpers right at the road edge, posing a hazard. So this will start we'll start notifying. If this is adopted, we will notify those specific areas, and I'm aware of where those areas are. We'll inform those homeowners that there is this ordinance and it's now in place, and you need to park parallel with your property. If it still becomes problematic, we may add a specific sign in front of those homes that says parallel parking only, just as a reminder. And if need be, then we would get to the issue where we might have to cite them for parking improperly. But certainly we're going to give them time to adjust to the scenario. But we do have areas, certainly in Old Town, where folks are parking in that way, so they're literally posing a danger, to the roadway because they're perpendicular with the roadway. And basically what it says in here is that you cannot park perpendicular in the public right-of-way at any time. Way we would help enforce that is, if need be, we would do notification and then signage if need be, and then if we had to do citations, we get into that. But we're going to try the soft approach for a while until we get people hopefully in compliance. And I think that is the last item. And then so this has the ordinance which adopts it, and then it has a resolution, which we elect to do resolution because then it's easier to make modifications later. So if we want to add parking restrictions to any street or change any, it'll be done by resolution in the future, which is easier to do than rather doing a formal hearing, public hearing to modify something. We can then adopt that change by resolution in the future, but the ordinance codifies all the particulars. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding this item.
Greg, start with you.
Thanks, Kevin. At this point, I'm supportive of the no parking, loading and unloading only. But you have a note or after that on most of Hamner Avenue. How would that be? What is most of Hamner, or who would be excluded? How would that be determined to either allow parking or just no parking or no unloading?
The intent is, I mentioned it earlier, I don't think maybe I was clear enough, but so the areas where the unloading wouldn't be allowed was simply because there's not enough road width to even allow any type of parking anytime. For example, the section right in front of the Bank of America and that shopping center that's just the south of that, it's too narrow to safely park in the street or allow any stopping anytime. And so there'll be just a no parking anytime in that section. Same thing for the undeveloped lot that is just north of the Jiffy Lube. I think it's Jiffy Lube. That whole lot there, obviously not safe enough for somebody to stop there regardless. There'll be signage there. So it's primarily the places that are either developed and way too narrow, the roadway, or it's undeveloped and it's way too narrow. But it's not a lot of sections, but there will be sections. That's why I wanted to be clear that there'll be most of Hamner will be unloading is okay. There's a few sections that I can't even allow that. Same thing in front of the restaurant and the auto place at 5th and Hamner. You don't want anybody stopping there to unload. They're in the lane at that point.
Where you hit the curb at the stoplight?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And I know it's a projection, but one of my concerns on that signage was that there's a potential for a larger commercial project at 3rd and Hamner, and I think any reference to allowable parking would be disastrous.
In that particular area, that is already, because of if it develops in the conditions, it's no parking anytime on Hamner. So that would get a sign that says specifically no parking anytime in that section because it's in the conditions that were approved.
Okay. That's all I have. Other than to thank both commissions for their time.
Couple questions. Thank you for, I sent you some questions before, Chad. Thank you for answering those. For the areas where loading and unloading will be allowed and where absolutely no parking will be allowed, is there going to be colored curbing, or is it going to be really clear for people to see here's where you can stop, here's where you can't stop, so there's no...
There won't be any color curbing. It'll just be, for example, most of Hamner will be, there are going to be some areas that we're required to put color curbing because it depends on where it's next to an intersection or it's next to a driveway approach, etc. That's few and far between. Most of it will simply be, like right now, a lot of it is no parking anytime. It really doesn't define from beginning or end. We can do those kind of signs, but normally we're just going to have no parking anytime loading and unloading only through most of Hamner, where we'll get very specific, where we'll say beginning and end. Will be no parking, beginning and end, like in front of the B
Okay,
of
that'll
A.
be very clear.
Yeah, that
Okay.
will be very clear.
And then just to be clear, the no parking on resident streets are all adjacent to horse trails or sides of the street where it's too narrow.
Correct.
It's unsafe for anyone to be parking. Okay, thank you.
Robin?
I just needed clarification. So I did get a phone call from Mr. Barreto regarding this. And one thing I'm just going to point out, just because the copy of the letter that we received in our packet is dated November 18th. The letter received by the businesses was dated November 22nd.
Correct.
And I do have some concerns, especially just around the holidays, that we're making sure to give people enough notice on items.
Just to clarify,
yes.
that was my fault in that I had it ready and for the staff report. We intended to try to get it out on Thursday, but we had some staffing issues that didn't get out, so that's why the letter is changed. I didn't keep it the 18th. I wanted to be honest.
Right,
I'd say
right.
I changed it to the 21st, so I apologize for that. I had it in the queue for you guys. It just didn't get out that day.
Right. Well, and when we get resident phone calls, I'm trying to see as many sides of the story as I possibly can. So my question to you is, when or if potential parking issues come up where a business does not have enough parking and is parking in the street or using an adjacent business, does that become a city issue, or is that between the two businesses, or is that, are we putting the burden on RSO? Because if we look at the area that Mr. Barreto is in, there is potential for that depending on how busy the business to the south of the trailer business gets. Who ends up dealing with that particular situation?
As far as on-site issues, as far as people using each other's parking, I would probably defer to maybe Alma as far as if there's any requirements. I don't know if there's any legal recourse for somebody parking in a lot unless it's posted as signs that for customer use only vehicles can be towed, because businesses can do that. I hate to get you started up, John, but do you want to give an opinion on that?
Get ready,
Yeah, no.
Greg.
You're correct. That there's nothing we can do as long as the use is otherwise permitted in the zone.
I mean, I give you an example that I'm already aware of. The North Auto Center which is north of Mr. Barreto's after the houses.
Mm-hmm.
There's two property owners in that. It's divided in half, and they don't get along. And the employees and customers are constantly using the various spaces of each to the point where they're getting cited because they're in the fire lane and this and that by code enforcement. I mean, that's stuff we do get involved if it's a violation related to public safety. So it definitely happens and can happen, and that's partly why were seeking and wanting, to get their parking on the street back. Because when I actually came on, just for clarifications, there was parking there. There was so much fighting, they actually asked it to be removed. And then a year later, they asked to have it come back. So.
And who is this again?
This is the North Auto Center.
Right across from Del Taco, correct?
Yes. So, and I did explain to them at the time, is that, look, this at some point is going to be reviewed by council, and it may go away or it may stay, but I want to formally tell them it's never been approved in the first place. So, but since it was there once before, I put it back. There was some nexus to it. But like I said, if they're accommodating and they're meeting the requirements, they should have enough parking on site for their employees and their customers. That's just an example of a very busy center where every piece of real estate is being utilized. So that's why most of those cars out in front, they're all employees. They're not customers.
I think that's owned by the Barretos, the auto center. Yeah.
Yeah. Family members.
The dad. It's Tony's dad.
So it is not a city issue. It'd be an issue to be taken care of between the two businesses.
In the relation to of just general angst about somebody using space, yes. If, like, for example, I know code enforcement has gone out and helped fire department deal with
Right.
violations of the fire lane, and
Right.
they've cited them for that. That's how we've gotten involved with those particular issues. But normal, just parking and taking up spaces, that's between the two parties.
Okay, thank you for answering my question.
Ted?
Okay, Jim. When we did, most of our problems with, going to concentrate on Hamner Avenue. And we definitely have an issue between 3rd and 5th Street, all the way through, especially on the east side, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have, when you took the consideration for loading and unloading, did you base it back that we have several improved easements on the road, right? There's sidewalks, everything. And then there's unimproved, correct?
Correct.
And I'm thinking of right there, the little barbecue place at 3rd and right there. There's no sidewalk. He's got the little thing you drive down, you're supposed to park in there. Okay. And then as I go down further, I see Dale's old place, the California Awards. That's still uneven, it's unimproved.
Correct.
And they have to park perpendicular into the little parking lot, even though he's closed. But I'm trying to think of his name. He owns the motorcycle group back there, the repair place. But all unimproved.
Right.
Then you got St. Augustine's, which is the storage lot. That's improved. And as we go up, all those, we have the thing all the way up till we get to the big lot past the Jiffy Lube and the smog place where you got unimproved. So hopefully somebody develop that someday and you get an improvement. But is that where you're going to concentrate the temporary 1 hour parking for loading and unloading only, or what do you do there?
For clarification, there is no 1 hour parking. It's simply just no parking anytime, unloading and loading only allowed. So there's no time limit on it. It's simply saying if you're there for loading and unloading, you're okay. But if you're parked there all day, sheriff gets a call, they can choose to ticket you because you're not unloading and loading, you're just parked there all day. But if you're a delivery truck of any type or person, you're there to drop off Grubhub, you're unloading and loading. You're there and gone. It's meant to accommodate that.
Okay. And you mentioned you can park in the middle of the road to unload.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever parked in the middle of the road to unload like that?
Personally, no.
I have.
Yeah.
I will tell you, it's as scary as hell.
Yep.
And you try to work a forklift in there, it's dangerous because you unload those trailers like the Berettos do. You try to unload any cargo van in there and try to unload like that, the chances are you're taking your life in your own hands.
That scenario, like for the Berettos, they could easily park along the road edge and unload.
Okay, that's what I'm.
Good.
Let's face it, unloading in the middle of the road is not safe.
No, I agree.
So, and I bring this up because now at 6th and Hamner, where the Starbucks and all that is, are we going to allow that, or is that no parking?
It's allowed basically from the last exit to about, I think, 30 feet before the corner, and because everything else from the corner, or about 30 feet out to the corner, is going to be red, so they're not blocking the turn lane. But they clearly do not have even enough parking in there to allow any deliveries. So we've been doing, and the drivers have been cooperating, is they're parking on Hamner at that last driveway.
Yeah, I know, because I see them there.
Because they were parking on 6th Street, and I had to go out and paint everything red, put 4 rows of signs, and they were still parking there in the middle of the lane. And so I had to get sheriff involved and also talk with Starbucks and say, if this occurs, your guys are going to get tickets. So that finally changed. But yes, they will park there, and they unload and then go through the whole parking lot to deliver the materials to Starbucks and a couple of the other places.
Is there a time limitation on that?
We're just specifying, saying it's loading and unloading. I mean, most of the drivers try to get in and out. They got to go to the next
No one
place.
wants to park on the side of the road.
Yeah.
You get hit. All right. And yeah, Tony did call me, and his concern, and like you said, was for those businesses that did not improve, and those businesses that did improve their front of their lots. Some of those businesses that improved their front of their lots are now going to have to pay the price for those that did not improve. And that was his conversation to me, just so they should understand. Because he improved it, which means he better spot to park. But if you didn't improve your business and those people, and I'll throw the barbecue place out there, people just park in front of the Paretos trailer place. And that's what happens.
Yeah, I mean, correct. It's obviously it's got very little parking in that little bar.
And he does have very little parking because what he has inside is per code, but it's hard because the business they're in the trailer business.
Right.
But then you get the people that are sitting on the north of him, which we made out, it's the little houses and stuff, and there's no improved driveway, there's no improved access, and people park nilly-willy wherever they want to there. Or so that just.
Well, just for clarification, the house to the north of Mr. Barretto's business, that is all improved. That was part of the improvements we did. And actually in front of that, those little 4 houses or whatever they are, that's no parking anytime. And then it jumps to the commercial center, which is where all the people park.
Yeah. It's my concern is that area I talked about is where most of our headaches are. And that's, as long as they can unload and give them a spot along the side of the street to unload, and safely, that's the hardest part. Because there was a point where the Brettel trailer, he had to go back over to where he rents that lot on the other side, on the west side, where, I'm trying to think of the name, the mechanic shop is.
Right.
And they had to ferry their trailer back over to the lot.
Right.
He says that was a nightmare too. But those are things, and I'm not trying to make it easy. I'm not trying to cater to one business owner. I want you to understand the issues of dealing with that. So, but as long as they have it and we mark it clearly marked, that was my whole thing, is clear marking, because eventually if we ever have to widen 6th Street, Hamner all the way down after the bridge because of traffic, you're going to need all 3. You're going to need as much road width as you can for those other lanes, right? If you wanted to make it a 6 lanes, 3 left, 3 north, 3 south.
Yeah, I personally hoping we never go to 6 lanes. I think 4 is perfect for Norco. But like I said, you never know in the future.
I don't know the future, but I agree with you. That area that we're on the little shopping center there, on the west side, that area, they'd have to pull back. You'd have to pull all the infrastructure back. What a nightmare! And then the corner of 5th and Hamner, I know what it's like to hit that curb. And I punched the tire on one of my trailers on that curb, and it's nasty. And so hopefully someday we'll resolve that.
I wish, that'd be great.
Okay, so all right, it's just, and then the rest along the streets, this is just a way of being unified as far as in conformed to everything, so it's the same, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the biggest thing is undocument it so that we can say definitively, and it's public record, it's kept with the clerk's office. We're able to give it to the sheriff so that if he's ever got a court, we say, look, it's signed there and it was formally adopted. This is why they got the ticket.
Okay, and proper signage. And you know what, and I think you've been out on a few of these calls where the public right-of-way, and the fact that for years there was no code enforcement in town. And the improvements done in the public right-of-ways, along especially on the street Kevin and I frequent so much, is that it was never resolved. And you've been down that street now.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see the perpendicular parking, and they think that's their property.
Yep.
And so
I do caution you not to say things like there was no code enforcement. I once had my head handed to me by a resident when I dared to inform her of that.
well, there was no effective code enforcement, okay? This will address all that, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comments?
I have no public comments.
We got one.
I had a concern about the residential area, 2nd Street, Park Ridge and Western. You said there's no parking there. Would that include Amazon deliveries, or I buy a couch and they stop in the road to deliver it?
Can you answer that, Chad?
I'm just trying to verify if there's no parking at Park Ridge and Western, because I wasn't specific on in my discussion of an area. Let me just look here in my list.
While he's looking at that, Kurt, do you have anything else that you wanted to
No,
address?
no, because right now there's on the southern end it's one lane, but on the northern end it's one lane, but it's like two lanes worth. So my concern is Grubhub, Amazon, or if I get a couch delivered, there's plenty of room, but yet there's no parking. I was wondering, could you change that to no or deliveries only?
Just for clarification, you're saying this is on Park Ridge between which streets?
Okay, Park Ridge and Western, the north side of 2nd.
I don't have any restrictions there.
2nd Street, yes, 2nd Street between.
Okay, so you're talking about 2nd
Second Street, sorry, 2nd Street between Park Ridge. It's really wide in that one lane.
I don't show any restrictions in that area at all for parking.
I thought it looked pink to me.
2nd Street, I have River Road to Valley View, Crone Avenue Hillside, River Road to 2nd Street to Mountain.
On the map?
Look at the map here. That'd be
I do
sheet.
apologize.
No, you're fine.
Oh, you're fine. Good question.
Second Street.
2nd Street, Park Ridge to Western, the north side.
Park Ridge on the north side or south side?
North side.
No, the north side of 2nd Street is no parking anytime. It's too narrow on that lane.
On that lane, though, if you know the lane, the southern end is just one lane, but the northern side of that is one lane, but it's really wide. If you understand.
The south side of that section is no parking for vehicles over 12,500 pounds.
Okay.
So you can park along that south section of 2nd Street.
Yeah, I'm talking about the north side.
North side you can't. It is not wide enough to safely park vehicles.
Can you correct them, Robin?
Would that be considered I've been there, is that your property then? The shoulder, would that be his property? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, it's not my property. It's city, the road, the lane is it's like two lanes, but it's technically one.
You know how the lanes are, Chad.
They're all over the place.
No, it's a lane, and then it's like, here's a big shoulder. It's like that. There's a big shoulder. That's why I'm wondering, I'm like, could it be considered his easement or his, you know what I mean? In which case, somebody could park there?
It's not my property. I was just wondering, there's plenty of room, and I was just wondering if it could be loading and unloading.
What are you referring to?
Right there.
On this side here?
Yep. Right there. Yep.
Just that segment?
Just that segment. Before, I think it's Pam's house, the
Pam Cecil.
Oh, Pam Cecil's house.
It's right there, just.
I'd have to look, again, without having a close-up view of it to check it, but our intention was between 2nd on that whole north side, it's pretty narrow on most of the section, so we just made it no parking anytime on all that northerly section all the way down, all the way to 2nd to River Road. I can look at that section there, and if it's wide enough to safely allow parking, I can modify that.
Well, and I have for clarification. For work, I was over there, and there was a gentleman that had a bunch of rocks in his front yard, and we bought rocks from him, and we parked. It's on the dirt, but it's along the road's edge. So if Grubhub or whoever is parking on the dirt and their tires are not on the asphalt, does that still count as no parking?
In general theory, if we believed in most of the cases when we reviewed it that you could safely park your full vehicle out of the roadway, then parking should be fine. It was just more of when you're getting in those narrow areas, and primarily most of 2nd Street going that
Absolutely,
direction
it
is
is,
very narrow. So we took the perspective of do we want anyone parking on the north side, of that roadway? Just make it consistent and easy to tag. So I could easily see that maybe this section got overlooked on when you're looking at a whole area.
Right.
And again, if it's wide enough and safe enough, I'm fine with modifying that and making that available and we could just skip that area and it's parking's allowed.
Yeah, because we parked a dually and we were off the roadway right there.
Yeah,
So.
and I live right there, and it would be parking on the asphalt, but that
You're
lane is
just past
huge.
that guy. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can easily, again, if it's adopted, we can adopt that change to say that, staff to review that, and if that section is wide enough to basically exclude that from the no parking restriction. If that works for you. Yeah. You could, but I don't think you want to put that on the whole section, because you don't want Amazon trucks stopping in the middle of Second Street between Mountain and Pacific, because they're blocking the roadway.
Chad, these are no parking or no stopping?
These are no parking anytime.
Okay, so that's a difference.
Yes.
And for clarification, there is a difference in the law. No parking doesn't mean no stopping.
Correct.
You can stop and you can make your delivery or you can get in and out. You just can't park. Parking is different. Parking is where you get out and you leave your car, and if it's a delivery, the chances are he is stopped, he is parked, but he's there for a legitimate purpose. That's how you have to look at it.
Okay, so Grubhub and Amazon.
Yeah, they're not actually, so just.
And in that, Councilman Hoppman's correct. We've tried not to get into those subtleties because it creates a lot of grayness about what you can or can't do. And that's why we simply said no parking anytime. We didn't want people to stop there for a while. But in theory, yes, if you stop there and you're quickly getting out and dropping it off, you can do that. And again, it is always up to the discretion of the officer if there's one there, depending on many factors, I would assume, how you approach him and what kind of day the officer's had. But he could choose to give you a ticket because it says, yep, you parked there. Sorry. Or they can understand, clearly see what this person's doing and move on. My suggestion in this particular scenario, based off the speaker, was probably we would just leave that section blank and I would jump over it. So it would say no parking anytime up to that point to the next location. It would jump. So it would just be blank, and which means you can park there. If that works for the council. Like I said, but I'll check it first. And if it's appropriate enough distance, then we can take that section out. We'll modify the index and the drawings. And I just want to highlight too, if anything comes up, after this is done and whatnot, we can easily go back and modify anything where you find out, you know what, we implemented this, but now I see a problem. I see concerns here. We can always bring it back and change it by resolution and adopt those changes or add things in. And we made it specifically so it's easier to change in the future if we wanted to.
Another living document.
Yes. And I do want to highlight, because I didn't before, both commissions really took a lot of time on this issue. I mean, we had several meetings. They thought about it very thoughtfully, asked a lot of good questions, so they were both good sounding boards to discuss this issue. So I do want to compliment both groups for really working well together.
Thank you, Kurt. Anybody else? Closing public comments, bring it back to council for action or discussion.
My only question to discuss with the council would just be the point that Councilmember Grunmayer brought up about if there was enough notice for any businesses to weigh in or residents, and if the council feels there is, then those are all my questions.
Council discussion?
I was contacted after the letter, so.
I was called too.
Yeah, so I think there was time. I want to be cognizant of holidays and stuff moving forward.
The letter went out on Monday of the 21st, and I got a call from Mr. Brito on Wednesday. So he quickly got the information. So I assume the other folks did too. And we not only sent it to the property address, we also sent it to the noticed or known property owner if it was a different address.
What is council's pleasure?
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 1077, first reading, and schedule the second reading for December 15th, 2001.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
Please vote.
Oh, wait, no.
Nope.
And just real quick,
ordinance of the city.
with the modification that was requested by council.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Norco, California, amending Norco Municipal Code Title 10, Vehicles and Traffic, to add Chapter 10.06, Parking Restrictions, Code Amendment 2021-08.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2021-79.
Second.
Please vote.
He just wanted to make sure we got it right.
Mayor Pro Tem. Vote. Motion passes unanimous. Thank you.
Moving on to 7, City Council Staff Communications. Chief, anything? Lieutenant? Alma? Bean counter? Lisette? Sam, anything? Matt? What did you say? Website. Hey, by the way, fantastic. Way to go. Really, really good job. And I know Kelly Newton had a lot to do with it, and staff, and amazing job. Chad? Michelle? Dana?
No, thank you.
John? Brian?
Just one thing. First of all, I'd like to just thank the City Council, the residents of Norco. This is my last official meeting in this capacity. I will be here on the 15th, and I hope I don't start crying. But I just want to say, all of you, thank you so very much for being able to work with you and to help lead and guide this community. Being a part of Norco has been probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me, and I'm so glad I came here 25 years ago. So my career led me here, and it's been just a blessing, and for my family as well. So we're going to move on. I'm going to miss those discussions with John tremendously, like we had tonight. But I'll tune in every once in a while and watch you on the web. But I just wanted to say thank you and thank the community and everyone for the support and also working with us to accomplish the goals that we have so far this year. And this council and the prior councils and commissions and city managers, it's really been an honor and a privilege to have worked here in this city and to work for you all. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. Ted?
You expect me to follow that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Earlier in the evening, I talked about council reports. I attended the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association convention and their seminars, and they have a couple of seminars. And for those you don't know, what we did up at the animal park and with the biosecurity up there, we followed the guidelines that were probably presented initially by the Professional Rodeo Cowboy Association as far as arena safety, animal safety, the care, and everything up there. That is being updated, and it's going to be on digital. So I will forward that when it comes through, and I'll forward it to animal control and the park so that they have the new copies and they're doing that. There's also some safety protocol up there too, as far as public safety and things like that. Part of the things they did, and this came from our friends up in there in Salinas and the rodeo, what they pointed out, and this is basically happening throughout the nation, but unfortunately California has a way of getting this stuff started by activists and people like that. And up in Los Angeles, with the city of Los Angeles, and if you're not aware, in February they started this thing where they were trying to ban rodeo in the city of LA, and they didn't realize there's a whole coalition of people in the horse industry and rodeo industry, especially the charros up there, that were not very happy. So that's been sitting there since February, and they haven't done anything with it, but they were taking it. But part of the thing, and like I said, our friends up in Salinas, they pointed out, and what they suggested doing for municipalities and for counties is to start looking at protecting, if you want to do that, protecting the working horse industry. Well, this is Horsetown USA. So what I'm going to do, Brian, is I'm going to give you this bill from Arkansas where they did it. It's very simple. And just ask that perhaps Animal Control, Michelle, and look at this and just maybe look at it with staff and legal, see what we need to do here in California. And I'll read this real quick. It's called the Working Animal Protection Act. Basically, and it goes through, the working animals are non-human, and this will help protect our carriage drivers, the people that use horses in their business, as far as like, especially for drivers and that, where they're pulling wagons and things like that. So they're trying to ban them in some of these areas. So just take a look at it, see what you think. It's really simple. It does not have to do with other animals in beef production, cattle and sheep and things like that. This is just basically equine. So if you don't mind, just take a look at it. And maybe bring it back to us if you have to, and if you need a general. But just take a look at it and see what you think. See if it's something we should be looking at in the future, and that's all. Thank you.
Robin? Catherine?
Not to beat a dead horse, but Kevin and I serve on the Naval Historic Commission, and it's not on our list of commissions. Can we add that on there? Because I didn't even know I got appointed to that one until I got an email about it. So can we add that one to the list?
Yeah, I thought it was on the list. Yeah. Okay. Oh.
It's not called naval, it's called something else.
Yeah. Because I remember a point. Okay. Greg.
I'll save my goodbyes for Brian for a later date. I just still keep laughing. Like, you have no idea where you're moving to, man. I just.
It was 16 degrees the other morning.
Yeah, that was during the middle of the day. I just. That's why I moved.
I
just want to, real quick, throw some numbers out to you. Tonight we approved a paving project for a little over $1 million on Hillside from just 5th to 6th. And, you know, every now and then we get beat up on social media about, like, why didn't you pave some more roads? Why didn't you fix my roads? City has no idea what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on and on. The section that we paved today, I just want to give you some numbers in perspective, is 2,625 lineal feet of reconstruction, curb and gutter, and paving. That number used to run not that long ago, $180 a lineal foot, basically $1 million a mile. So with today's price on this low bid, it's now $391 a lineal foot, which means if you were to equate that, we're instead of right under $1 million, not that long ago per mile, we're about $2,100,000 per mile. And then when people ask how we spend our money and our property tax, our yearly income from property tax is $2 million, not figuring Measure R and Measure A and what we get from the state. How much do you want us to do with that kind of money? So, you know, when you're being challenged and with that argument, that's what you're looking at, $2 million a mile for a complete reconstruction. And then I played with Chad a little bit to just really shock you. We took, most of the work's going to be in Old Town, but we took our total footage, okay, of what we need to do for all our roads in town. It's a little over 1,318,000 lineal feet that we're going to need just a little over $500 million over the next 20 to 30 years. If you want to repave all the streets, actually it's 515 $100,000. So Build Back Better. But I thought that would just kind of give you a little, I'm going to apply for that money because we're going to need it.
They're printing it as fast as they can, so we should be okay.
I know, but it's just like how, to me, that's really shocking how it's just doubled that fast, and that you're limited with your funding. So, that's it.
Okay, first off, November Vet Appreciation Month. Would you guys like to agendize that and talk about making that an official?
Kevin, I would, except in 1996, it already has been a National Military Families Month.
So I'll contact Keep 'em and let her know.
Let her know May is considered National Military Appreciation Month.
Okay.
And then November is known as Military Families Month.
So it's already done.
It's already done. It's
All
been
right.
there since 1996.
And-
So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it's just wording. We can leave it veterans, whatever.
Yeah,
but
I'm
that's-
fine. I'm good with it. Just so you all know, Bob Hicks's funeral or service is 1 o'clock Saturday at Nellie Weaver Hall. So if you knew Bob, might be nice to show up. I'm sure the family would appreciate it. And then finally, Tuesday morning, hope to see you all at our Pearl Harbor Day. We have the Admiral who's in charge of basically the entire West Coast, Rear Admiral Barnett. We got music and flyovers and the reason that we do the Pearl Harbor is not just so much because the entire hospital was here because of Pearl Harbor, but because we use it as a kickoff point to remember all those that have served and given all. This year it's going to be at our memorial because we couldn't depend on the Navy base being closed or opened due to the COVID issue. So this year we're doing it there, and hopefully people, I always think nobody's going to show up, but we're putting on a heck of a show. The Lake Narconian Club is co-sponsoring it. The Memorial Committee, they're involved, and so hopefully we'll see you all there. And with that, we are... Oh, got it? All right, December 11th. We're now adjourned.
No, a week ago Saturday, my next door neighbors had a big birthday blowout party with a really loud mariachi band.